The heart monitor's alarm sliced through the silence of the pediatric ER like a knife through flesh. I looked up from the chart in my hands, my eyes struggling to focus on the numbers that had been swimming on the page for the past hour. My stomach dropped as reality crashed over me in a sickening wave. The 4-year-old in bed 3 had stopped breathing, his small chest completely still beneath the thin hospital blanket, and I hadn't noticed. I'd been standing less than 10 feet away, supposedly monitoring him, and I hadn't seen the moment his life started slipping away. My feet moved before my brain caught up, muscle memory from 4 years of emergency training taking over where my exhausted mind had failed. I ran to the bedside as the monitor's flat tone filled my ears like a scream, that horrible sustained note that meant death was winning. Dr. Martinez was already there, his hands positioned precisely on the child's chest, his voice steady as he counted compressions with the kind of calm that came from saving lives every single day. My hands shook as I prepared the crash cart, my fingers fumbling with equipment I could usually operate in my sleep. 6 months ago, I would have been the first one there. The one doing compressions, the one everyone looked to in an emergency. 6 months ago, I would have been the first one there. The one I hadn't been walking through my shifts like a ghost haunting the halls of Boston Children's Hospital. Hazel, the intubation kit. Now. Dr. Martinez's voice cut through my spiral, sharp and commanding in a way that left no room for my paralysis. I grabbed it with trembling hands, passed it over, and watched Dr. Martinez work with the precision I used to have, the confidence I used to feel every time I walked onto this floor, the precision I'd lost somewhere between my mother's funeral and tonight, lost in the fog of grief that followed me everywhere like a shadow I couldn't shake. The monitor beeped once, a sound so beautiful it made my knees weak. Twice. Then settled into a steady rhythm, the most precious sound in the world, a heartbeat returning from the edge of nothing. The child gasped, his small chest rising as air filled his lungs again, his body fighting its way back to life, alive. He was alive. No thanks to me. Dr. Martinez looked at me with eyes that had seen too many nurses burn out, too many good people destroyed by the weight of this job. His expression said everything his mouth didn't, every word of disappointment and concern written clearly across his weathered face. Go home, Brooks. You're done for tonight. It wasn't a suggestion, and we both knew it. It was a command, maybe even a mercy, sending me away before I could do any more damage. I walked to the locker room on autopilot, my feet carrying me down familiar hallways while my mind replayed those terrible seconds over and over, changed out of my scrubs with numb fingers that didn't feel like they belonged to me anymore. My supervisor would call tomorrow. I knew that with cold certainty, there would be an incident report, forms to fill out, meetings where they'd discuss my fitness for duty in careful professional language. Maybe worse. Maybe they'd finally do what I'd been too cowardly to do myself and end this. I'd almost killed a child tonight because I'd been thinking about my mother's last breath instead of watching my patients, because I'd been drowning in memories of holding her hand in hospice while a little boy's life hung in the balance. The weight of that failure sat on my chest like a stone, making it hard to breathe. The parking garage was empty at 2 a.m, my Honda Civic sitting alone under flickering fluorescent lights that cast everything in sickly yellow. I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white, staring at nothing. I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't walk into that hospital day after day and pretend I was okay. Pretend I was the same nurse I'd been before cancer had stolen the only family I had left. I needed to leave this place. Needed to go somewhere. My grief couldn't follow me into a patient's room and turn me into a danger instead of a healer. Somewhere I could be useful again without the risk of killing someone, because my mind was 6 months in the past. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration startling me out of my spiral. A text from the hospital staff group chat. Someone sharing a photo from the break room bulletin board at 3 a.m. because nurses never slept. I almost deleted it, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I saw the posting that would change everything. Urgent. Live-in nanny needed. 3 children, 18 months old. Private residence, room and board included. $15,000 per month. Pediatric nursing experience required. Call for interview. I read it twice, then a third time, certain I was misreading the numbers. $15,000 for 1 month of work. That was more than I made in 3 months at the hospital, more money than I'd ever seen in my life for a single job. The number at the bottom stared back at me like a challenge, like a lifeline thrown into dark water. I should delete the message, should go home to my studio apartment and figure out my life like a normal person, like someone who hadn't just almost killed a child. Should call my supervisor tomorrow and admit I needed time off, needed help, needed something. Instead, my fingers dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it, before common sense could override the desperate need to run as far from this parking garage as possible. The phone rang once before a woman's voice answered, professional but exhausted in a way I recognized from every nurse I'd ever worked with. This is Valentina. Are you calling about the position? Yes, my name is Hazel Brooks. I'm a pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital. Maybe was. I didn't know anymore. How soon can you come for an interview? Her voice brightened slightly, like she hadn't expected anyone to call this late, like she was as desperate as I was. I looked at the empty parking garage, at the hospital looming behind me in the darkness, at the place where I'd just failed the most important test a nurse could face, at the building that held everything I used to be, and everything I could no longer pretend to be. Tomorrow morning. I can come tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. I'll text you the address. She paused, and I heard something shift in her tone, something careful and measured. Miss Brooks, one question before we proceed. Yes? Do you have family? A partner? Anyone who would look for you if you disappeared for a few months? The question hung in the air between us, strange and specific in a way that should have raised every red flag I had. The question should have been a red flag, should have made me hang up immediately and block the number and thank God I'd dodged whatever bullet this was. Should have sent me running in the opposite direction. Instead, I thought of my empty apartment with its bare walls and secondhand furniture, my mother's urn on the mantel, the only decoration I had, the only thing that made the place feel like anything other than a temporary stop. The silence that greeted me every night, so complete it felt like drowning, like the whole world had gone quiet when she died. No, there's no one. The words came out flat, emotionless, the simple truth of my completely empty life. Good. We'll see you at 10. She hung up before I could respond, before I could ask what kind of job required that question, what I was really signing up for. I sat in the dark, phone in my hand, the screen's glow the only light in the car. I should feel afraid, should question why they'd ask such a strange thing, should be wondering what kind of people needed to know if anyone would notice if I vanished. But all I felt was relief, washing over me like a wave. Relief that somewhere in this city someone needed me for something, even if I didn't know why, even if every instinct I had was screaming that this was wrong. The Uber driver looked uncomfortable as we turned onto the private road, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror like he was checking to make sure I really wanted to be here. Massive iron gates opened automatically, like they'd been expecting me, like cameras I couldn't see had already identified me as an approved visitor. He didn't say a word as he dropped me at the entrance, and drove away fast, his tires kicking up gravel in his hurry to leave. The mansion rose in front of me like something out of a movie, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. My mother used to flip through in hospital waiting rooms, colonial Italian style, white stone gleaming in the morning sun, perfectly manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than my annual salary. I'd grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dorchester with thin walls and thinner carpets. This was a different world, a different universe entirely. I rang the doorbell, the chime echoing somewhere deep inside the house. Heavy footsteps approached, measured and unhurried, the sound of someone who never had to rush for anything. The woman who opened the door was in her mid-50s, elegant in a simple black dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, kind eyes that looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. This had to be Valentina, the voice from the phone, the woman who'd asked me that strange question about whether anyone would miss me. Miss Brooks, thank you for coming. She stepped aside with practiced grace, her movements precise and controlled. Please follow me. The interior was immaculate in a way that felt almost oppressive. Every surface gleaming, every object in its perfect place. Marble floors that reflected my cheap shoes, high ceilings that made me feel small, expensive art on the walls that I couldn't begin to understand or appreciate, but something felt wrong beneath the perfection, something I couldn't quite name. Too quiet, too still, like a museum, not a home with 3 toddlers who should be making noise and mess and chaos. Valentina led me to a formal sitting room, her heels clicking against the marble in a steady rhythm. We sat across from each other on furniture that probably cost more than my car, cream-colored fabric that looked like it had never been sat on, like it existed purely for show. I'll be direct, Miss Brooks. The children need help, specialized help. She folded her hands in her lap, her fingers laced together so tightly her knuckles were white. Their mother died 6 months ago. Complications from childbirth. Since then, we've had 9 nannies. None lasted more than 3 weeks. 9 nannies in 6 months. My nurse brain calculated automatically, running the numbers even as my heart sank. That meant the children had experienced 9 cycles of attachment and abandonment, 9 times of learning to trust someone, only to have them disappear, on top of losing their mother, on top of having their entire world destroyed before they were even old enough to understand what they'd lost. What happened to the nannies? I asked, keeping my voice neutral, professional, like I was taking a patient history. They quit. The children are difficult. Valentina's voice cracked slightly. The first real emotion I'd heard from her, a hint of the exhaustion beneath the professional mask. They don't sleep. They barely eat. They cry for hours without stopping, without comfort. And they reject anyone who tries to help them, anyone who tries to get close. And their father? I asked the question carefully, aware that I was probing into territory that might be off limits. Something shifted in Valentina's expression, a wall sliding down behind her eyes, careful, guarded, the look of someone who'd been trained not to reveal too much. Mr. Ritchie travels frequently for business. He provides for them financially, but he struggles to be present emotionally. I knew that dance. Had seen it 100 times in hospital rooms, the way people talked around grief, around guilt, using careful words to describe the inability to function, to cope, to be what the people you loved needed you to be, around the kind of pain that made you useless to everyone, including yourself. The children have his wife's eyes. Valentina continued quietly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It's difficult for him to look at them without seeing her. My chest tightened with recognition, with understanding that came from living inside that same kind of pain. I understood that kind of grief, the kind that made you avoid the things you loved most, because loving them hurt too much, because every reminder was a knife wound that never stopped bleeding, the kind that turned love into torture. I'd like to meet them, I said, the words coming out steadier than I felt. Valentina studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face like she was trying to see something beneath the surface, trying to determine if I was different from the 9 who'd come before me. Miss Brooks, I need to be clear about something. This position requires you to live here full-time. You cannot discuss this family, this address or Mr. Ritchie's business with anyone outside these walls. Do you understand? The warning was obvious even through the careful phrasing, impossible to miss. This wasn't just about privacy. Wasn't just about protecting wealthy people from public scrutiny. This was about secrets. About something darker than I'd imagined, about a world I didn't understand. I should have asked more questions, should have demanded to know what kind of business required this level of security, what I was really walking into, should have stood up and walked out, and never looked back. Instead, I nodded, sealing my fate with a simple gesture. I understand. Then let me take you to the nursery. She stood with fluid grace, already moving toward the door like my agreement was never in doubt. We walked down a long hallway lined with more expensive art, our footsteps muffled by Persian rugs that probably cost more than a year of my rent. I could hear it before we reached the door, a sound that made my nurse instincts kick into overdrive. Crying, not the normal fussing of toddlers, not the temporary upset of children who needed a diaper change or a snack. This was the desperate, exhausted sobbing of children who'd learned that no one was coming, that screaming changed nothing, that they were alone no matter how loud they cried. Valentina opened the door with a key. I noticed. Locked. They kept the nursery locked. The nursery was beautiful in the way that money could buy, decorated by someone who understood expensive taste but not children. 3 cribs with white bedding that looked like it had never been slept in. Toys organized on shelves in perfect rows. Soft lighting from lamps that cast everything in a gentle glow. Everything a child could need spread out before me like a department store display. Except the one thing they needed most. Except love, presence, someone who would stay. 3 18-month-olds stood in their cribs like prisoners in cells, small hands gripping the bars, 2 boys, 1 girl, dark hair that needed brushing, tear-streaked faces that broke my heart. Identical in their misery, their abandonment, their hopelessness. And eyes. Green eyes with golden flecks that seemed to glow in the dim light. The most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen, haunted eyes, grief-stricken eyes. Eyes too old for faces so young. All 3 turned to look at me as we entered. Those identical eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me want to step back, wary, hopeless, like they'd already decided I would leave too, like they'd learned this lesson 9 times already. and knew how this story ended. "This is Nico, Sophia, and Marco," Valentina said softly, gesturing to each crib in turn, giving names to the broken babies who stared at me like I was just another person who would disappoint them. I stepped closer, moving slowly using the same careful approach I'd use with a traumatized patient in the ER. Nico, the biggest of the three, backed away immediately, pressing himself against the far corner of his crib like I might hurt him. If I got too close, Sophia just stared, rocking slightly in a self-soothing motion that made my stomach turn. Her eyes focused somewhere past me, somewhere I couldn't reach. Marco reached out his arms toward me in a gesture that looked almost hopeful, then seemed to think better of it, and pulled them back, like he'd been punished for wanting before. My heart shattered into pieces as I looked at them, at these three babies who'd lost everything and learned to expect nothing, at the evidence of trauma written in every gesture, every defensive movement, every hopeless eye. "How long do I have to decide?" I asked, though I already knew the answer, already felt the decision settling into my bones like it had been made the moment I saw them. "How long do you need?" Valentina's voice was gentle, understanding, like she already knew what I was going to say. I looked at those three broken babies, at the fear and grief written in their mother's eyes that somehow lived on in their children's faces, at the emptiness in this too quiet house that felt like a tomb, like a place where joy had died and left only expensive things behind, at the evidence of 9 failures, 9 people who'd looked at this and walked away. I'll take the job." The words came out firm, certain, the first thing I'd been sure of since my mother died. Valentina exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath, like she hadn't dared to hope I might be different. "When can you start?" I thought of my studio apartment with its bare walls and secondhand furniture, already feeling like a place I used to live, my empty life that had nothing in it but work, and grief, and the slow drowning of depression. The hospital where I'd almost killed a child because I couldn't focus through my grief, where I'd become a danger instead of a healer. Today, I can start today, because there was nothing left for me in that old life anyway, because these babies needed me now, because running away had brought me exactly where I needed to be. Valentina left me alone with them, her footsteps fading down the hallway like the last lifeline being pulled away. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything," she said at the door, but I heard what she didn't say underneath the polite words. "When you need anything, when you give up like the others, when you realize this is impossible and call for help to escape." I sat on the floor between the 3 cribs, making myself as small and non-threatening as possible. Kept my distance, didn't try to reach for them or force interaction. They weren't ready for. Let them observe me. Let them decide what to make of this new stranger in their carefully controlled world. Nico watched me like a tiny guard dog protecting his territory, every muscle in his little body tense and ready to fight or flee, every breath careful, every movement calculated. Sophia had gone back to rocking, staring at nothing with those devastating green eyes, retreating into whatever safe place she'd built inside her mind. Marco's crying had quieted to hiccuping sobs that shook his small frame, exhausted sounds that suggested he'd been crying for hours before I arrived, that this was just a temporary pause in endless misery. "Hey," I said softly, keeping my voice low and gentle, the tone I'd use with a frightened animal or a patient in shock. "My name is Hazel." No response. I didn't expect one, didn't need one. This wasn't about getting them to perform or respond. This was about being present, about showing up, about not leaving. I'd worked pediatrics for 4 years before tonight, had seen every kind of childhood trauma the ER could offer. I knew trauma when I saw it, recognized the signs in the way they held themselves, the way they watched me. These babies weren't just grieving their mother's death, they were protecting themselves, building walls, learning that attachment meant pain and abandonment, that love was something that disappeared without warning. "I know you don't know me," I continued, talking more to fill the silence than because I expected understanding. "And I know a lot of people have come and gone through that door, but I'm going to stay. I'm going to be here." Marco made a small sound at my words, not quite a cry, almost a question, almost like some part of him wanted to believe me but had learned better than to hope. I slowly reached into my bag, moving deliberately so they could see every motion, so nothing would startle them, pulled out a small stuffed bear I'd grabbed from my apartment before leaving, thinking I might need something familiar. It had been my mother's from her childhood, one of the few things I'd kept when I cleaned out her apartment, one of the only objects that connected me to her now. The only thing I'd brought with me that mattered, that carried any weight of love. I held it up where all three could see it, offering it like a peace treaty. Sophia's rocking slowed as she focused on the bear, her eyes coming back from wherever they'd been, anchoring on something concrete. Her small hands opened and closed, a gesture I recognized as wanting, as interest, as the first crack in the wall she'd built. "This was my mama's," I said, and the words hurt to speak but felt necessary, like offering my own wound to show them I understood. "She's not here anymore either. She died 6 months ago." The words hurt to say, but something in Sophia's expression shifted when I spoke them, like she understood loss even if she couldn't articulate it. Like she recognized the grief in my voice, because it matched the grief in her own heart, like she knew I was broken too. I set the bear on the floor between us, equidistant from all three cribs, didn't move closer, didn't try to force anything, just let it sit there as an offering, as a bridge, as proof that I understood what they'd lost. Minutes passed in silence. 5, 10, the only sound was their breathing and Sophia's quiet rocking and the distant hum of the house around us. I didn't move, didn't push, just sat and waited, and let them decide if I was safe. Then Sophia moved, climbing down from her crib with the unsteady movements of a toddler still learning her body. Nico made a small noise of alarm at her movement, a protective sound, but she kept going. One foot, then the other, wobbling slightly as she found her balance. She walked to the bear with single-minded focus, each step deliberate, picked it up with both hands, holding it like something precious. Looked at me with those devastating green eyes that held her mother's ghost, searching my face for something I hoped I could provide. "Mama," she whispered, the word barely audible but hitting me like a physical blow. The word broke me, cracked something open in my chest that I'd been holding closed since my mother died. But I kept my voice steady, kept my face calm, didn't let her see how much that single word had destroyed me. "Yeah, baby. For my mama. She loved this bear." Sophia hugged the bear to her chest, clutching it like a lifeline, like the first comfort she'd found in months. Then she did something that stopped my heart, that changed everything. She walked over with careful steps, and climbed into my lap without invitation, without hesitation, just sat there, holding the bear, her little body finally still, finally quiet, finally finding a moment of peace. Nico stared at us from his crib, his green eyes wide and calculating, deciding, weighing the risk, watching to see if his sister would be hurt, if this was safe, if I could be trusted. Marco started crying again, but this time it was different. I could hear the difference even if I couldn't explain it. This time he reached for me with both arms extended, really reached, his whole body straining toward me, desperate and hopeful and terrified all at once, taking the biggest risk of his short life. I opened my other arm in invitation, making space for him next to his sister. "It's okay. Come here. I've got you." He climbed down too with fumbling movements, stumbled over to me on uncertain feet, nearly fell twice, buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed, really sobbed, letting out something that had been trapped inside for months. His little hands clutched my shirt, holding on like I might disappear if he loosened his grip. Nico was the last, always the most careful, always the protector. He waited another 5 minutes while I held his siblings, watching, making sure, doing the risk assessment that 2-year-olds shouldn't have to do. Then he climbed down with careful precision, walked over with measured steps, and simply leaned against my side, his weight settling against me like he was too tired to stay upright anymore. I sat there on that nursery floor, with 3 broken babies in my arms, their small bodies warm against mine. They smelled like baby shampoo and tears, and something uniquely them, their little hearts beat against mine, 3 separate rhythms gradually synchronizing with my own breath. This was why 9 nannies had quit. I realized with sudden clarity, not because the children were difficult or demanding or badly behaved, because the grief was overwhelming, crushing, impossible to hold, because feeling their pain meant facing your own, meant opening up wounds you'd been trying to keep closed, because being present for their trauma meant not running from your own. I thought of my mother, of the hole she'd left in my life that nothing could fill, of how I'd been running from it for 6 months, trying to outpace grief like it was something you could leave behind. Of the hollowness that had taken up residence in my chest where my heart used to be. Maybe I couldn't run anymore, I thought as I held these 3 babies who understood loss in a way no child should. Maybe these 3 needed someone who understood that kind of emptiness, who'd walked through that same darkness and could guide them through it too. "I've got you," I whispered into the quiet nursery, To the 3 children who'd given me their trust despite 9 reasons not to. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. I didn't know if I was talking to them or to myself. Didn't know if I was making a promise I could keep. But in that moment, with 3 babies breathing against me, I meant every word. The first night almost broke me. Almost sent me running like the 9 who'd come before. Valentina showed me to my room at 7, leading me down another hallway to a door I'd barely noticed. Guest suite on the 2nd floor. Bigger than my entire apartment, with its walk-in closet and marble bathroom. Private bathroom, walk-in closet, view of the gardens that probably looked beautiful in daylight. Like a 5-star hotel, like something from a magazine, like a place where someone important should stay. The baby monitor is on the nightstand, she said as she prepared to leave, pointing to the device that would become my lifeline. The children usually wake around 9, and 11, and 1, and 3, and 5. She wasn't joking. I realized as the night unfolded. She was being optimistic. At 9:15, Marco's screams came through the monitor, cutting through the silence like a siren. I ran down the hall to the nursery, my feet pounding on expensive rugs, my heart already racing. He was standing in his crib, face red from crying, arms reaching desperately toward the door. The moment I picked him up, he clutched my shirt like I might disappear if he didn't hold on tightly enough, his little fingers twisting the fabric into knots. It took 20 minutes to calm him, 20 minutes of rocking and humming and whispering promises into his hair. The second I put him back in his crib, gentle as I could manage, Sophia started, like they'd made an agreement to take turns, to make sure I never got a moment of rest. At 11, it was Nico. At 1, all 3 at once, their cries building on each other until the noise was overwhelming. By 3 in the morning, I was sitting on the floor between their cribs, exhausted beyond anything I'd felt in the ER. My back against the wall, eyes burning with exhaustion that went deeper than just lack of sleep. They'd finally fallen asleep again, but I was afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loud, afraid that any sound would restart the cycle. This was what the other nannies had faced, what had broken them one after another, this relentless, suffocating need that never stopped, never eased, never gave you a moment to catch your breath. These children didn't just want comfort the way normal toddlers did. They needed constant proof that someone was still there, that they hadn't been abandoned again, that this person wouldn't disappear like their mother had, like 9 nannies had. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration startling me in the quiet. A text from the hospital, arriving in the dead of night like a ghost from my old life. The incident report hearing was scheduled for next week. Formal language about discussing my current fitness for duty, like I was a machine that needed maintenance. I stared at the message. At the career I'd built over 4 years. At the person I used to be. At the future I'd imagined for myself that seemed like it belonged to someone else now. Then I looked at the 3 cribs, at the small lumps beneath blankets that represented 3 lives depending on me, at Nico's little hand gripping the bars even in sleep, holding on like the crib might disappear if he let go, at Sophia curled around my mother's bear, finally finding comfort in something soft, at Marco's chest rising and falling, finally peaceful after hours of desperate crying. I deleted the text without responding, watching the words disappear like they'd never existed. Deleted my old life with one swipe. At 5, Marco woke up crying again, right on schedule. I was already exhausted, running on fumes, my body aching in ways I didn't know were possible. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. My head pounded with the kind of headache that came from too little sleep and too much stress. I picked him up before his cries could wake his siblings, moved on autopilot now. Started humming the lullaby my mother used to sing to me when I was small, the one I'd sung to her in the hospital those last few weeks when roles had reversed and I'd become the parent. The melody came back easily, muscle memory from childhood, carrying all the love and loss I couldn't put into words. Marco's crying softened at the familiar tune, his little body relaxing against mine like he recognized something in the sound. His little body relaxed against mine, tension draining out of him like water. Then Sophia woke up, her cries softer than her brother's. Then Nico, completing the set, ensuring I wouldn't get any more sleep tonight. I should have called for Valentina. Should have pressed the call button. I'd been shown, should have admitted I couldn't do this alone. Should have admitted defeat like the 9 before me. Instead, I sat in the rocking chair, rearranging children until they all fit. Marco in my lap, Sophia tucked against my left side, Nico against my right, 3 babies breathing in sync with my heartbeat, their small bodies warm against mine, their weight somehow both overwhelming and grounding. "It's okay," I whispered into the pre-dawn darkness. not sure who I was trying to convince. I'm here. I'm not leaving. I promise. I said it over and over like a promise, like a prayer, like a spell that might make it true, like repeating it enough times would make it real, would give me the strength to keep that promise, would transform me into someone who didn't fail. The sun started to rise through the nursery windows, golden light spilling across the floor in streams that looked almost holy. Golden light spilling across the floor, painting everything in warm color. The children had fallen asleep again, draped across me like they were afraid I'd vanish if they let go, like I was the only solid thing in their world. Every muscle in my body screamed with exhaustion, protesting the awkward position and the weight of 3 toddlers. My eyes felt like sandpaper, dry and burning. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been this tired, not even during my longest ER shifts. But for the first time in 6 months I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, like I'd finally found my purpose, like maybe I hadn't been running away, but running toward something all along. Even if it was killing me, even if I didn't know how I'd survive another night like this. The door opened quietly, the sound barely audible. I looked up, squinting against the morning light. A man stood in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the hallway lights. Tall, dark suit despite the early hour, black hair, sharp features that looked like they'd been carved from stone. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks, shadows under his eyes that spoke of exhaustion deeper than mine. But it was his eyes that stopped me, held me frozen in place. Dark brown, almost black in the dim light, and completely empty, void of any emotion I could read, like looking into nothing. This had to be him. Lorenzo Ricci, the father who couldn't look at his children. He stared at the scene before him, taking in every detail, at his 3 children sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, their faces relaxed in sleep. At the stranger holding them, some woman he'd never met now cradling everything he had left in the world. His jaw tightened, muscle jumping under skin. Something flickered across his face too fast for me to read. Pain, anger, relief, hope. I couldn't tell which. Maybe all of them at once. Maybe emotions too complex to name. "You're still here," he said finally, his voice rough like he hadn't used it in a while. His voice was rough, deep, with an accent that made every word sound dangerous, that turned simple statements into something loaded with meaning. Deep, with an accent that made every word sound dangerous, like even casual conversation came with the threat of violence. I said I would be. My voice came out steadier than I felt, matching his tone, refusing to show weakness. He looked at me like he didn't believe me, like he was waiting for the moment I'd prove him right, like he was waiting for me to prove him right, to leave like all the others, to add myself to the list of people who'd abandoned his children, to leave like all the others had, like he'd learned to expect. Valentina said they slept, he continued, taking a step into the room but keeping his distance, like he was afraid to get too close. I came to see if it was true. They did. Not for long, but they did. I didn't elaborate, didn't explain how many times they'd woken up, how exhausted I was, how close I'd come to calling for help. He stepped into the room with the confidence of someone who owned everything he surveyed. Closer. His presence filled the space, made the air feel heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. He moved like a man used to being obeyed, to being feared, every gesture controlled and deliberate, to being feared, like violence was always an option, just beneath the surface. But when he looked at his children, that carefully controlled mask cracked. Just for a second, pain flashed across his features, raw and unguarded, before he rebuilt the walls. Nico stirred in his sleep, making a small sound, turned his head toward his father like he could sense his presence even unconscious. Like some part of him knew his father was finally here, even unconscious, seeking him out, calling for the parent who couldn't answer. Lorenzo froze like someone had stuck a knife between his ribs, his hands clenched at his sides, fingers curling into fists, his hands clenched at his sides, tight enough that his knuckles went white. I saw it then, understood what Valentina had been trying to tell me, the reason he couldn't be with them, the reason 9 nannies had come and gone while he watched from a distance. The reason 9 nannies had come and gone, why this house felt like a mausoleum. He was terrified. Terrified of those 3 little faces with their mother's eyes, of the grief they represented, of the love that had become too painful to bear. Terrified of those 3 little faces with their mother's eyes, staring up at him, reminding him of everything he'd lost. "They need you," I said quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched too long. His gaze snapped mine, sharp and cold. Cold. Warning me not to push. Not to cross lines. I didn't understand. Warning me not to push. Threatening without words. They have you now. His voice was flat, final, like he'd made this decision long ago and wouldn't be changing it. I'm not their father. The words came out harder than I intended. Frustration bleeding through my exhaustion. No, his voice was ice, cutting, designed to end the conversation. You're not. He turned and walked out before I could respond, before I could push back, before I could tell him he was wrong. The door closed behind him with a soft click, the sound of another abandonment, another person leaving them behind. The door closed behind him with a soft click, cutting off whatever else I might have said, leaving me alone with 3 children who needed their father more than they needed me. I sat there holding his children he couldn't bear to touch, wondering what kind of man could look at his babies and walk away. Wondering what kind of man could look at his babies and walk away. What kind of pain could make that the easier choice? Wondering what kind of pain could make that the easier choice. What wound went so deep that even your own children's faces became unbearable. 3 days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small victories, then a week. I fell into a rhythm with the children, learning their language, their needs, their fears. Morning routine became something we could predict, something that felt almost normal. Breakfast at 7. The 3 of them in high chairs that probably cost more than my rent. Nico ate only if I ate first, showing him it was safe, proving that the food wasn't dangerous or poisoned or a trick. Sophia needed her food cut into perfect squares or she wouldn't touch it. Some need for control in a world that had spun out of control. Marco wanted to be held while he ate, like he was afraid I'd leave if he let go, like every separation might be permanent. I learned their language better than any words they could speak. The different cries that meant different things. Tired versus hungry versus scared versus hurt. The way Nico's jaw tightened when he was about to have a meltdown, muscle jumping under baby soft skin. Sophia's rocking that meant she was retreating inside herself, going somewhere I couldn't follow. Marco's grip that told me exactly how much he needed me in that moment, his small hands squeezing tighter the more afraid he became. They were sleeping better. 4-hour stretches now instead of 2, actual progress that felt like winning a war. Small victory, but it felt like winning a war, like proof I was doing something right. Lorenzo, I barely saw, only catching glimpses of him like a ghost haunting his own house. He left before dawn, his car pulling out of the driveway while the house was still dark, came home after the children were asleep. Silent footsteps that I tracked on the security monitors. I'd hear his footsteps in the hallway after midnight. The soft sound of expensive shoes on expensive carpet, pausing outside the nursery door, standing there for minutes at a time. Never coming in, never crossing that threshold, never facing what was inside. Valentina noticed my frustration, reading it in the way I moved, the questions I didn't ask. He used to read to them every night, she said one morning, over coffee in the pristine kitchen. Before, when his wife was alive, every single night, no matter how late he worked. What was she like? I asked, hungry for information about the ghost that haunted this house. Valentina's eyes softened with memory, her professional mask slipping. Sarah. She was light in a dark place. She made him laugh. Something I thought was impossible. Made him human instead of just the boss. She paused, her voice dropping. The pregnancy was difficult from the beginning. Triplets often are. But she was so happy, radiant despite the sickness and pain. They both were, like they couldn't believe their luck. What happened? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know, wasn't sure I could handle another story of loss. Blood clot. 6 months after they were born, she collapsed in the nursery while putting them down for a nap. Just dropped like someone had cut her strings. Valentina's voice broke, tears filling her eyes even now. He found her there, lying on the floor between their cribs. Already gone. TR didn't work. Nothing worked. She was just gone. My chest tightened painfully at the image, understanding flooding through me. I looked at the nursery down the hall, at the spot where Sierra had died, at the spot where I sat every night between those same 3 cribs, unknowingly recreating his nightmare. He'd lost her in the exact place I'd found my purpose, the place where she'd taken her last breath. Now the place where I was trying to bring life back. No wonder he couldn't come in. No wonder he couldn't look at his children. He blames himself, Valentina continued, needing to tell this story even if it hurt. Thinks if he'd been home instead of at a meeting with the families. If he'd noticed she wasn't feeling well that morning, If he'd made any different choice. I understood that guilt better than I wanted to, had lived in it myself for 6 months. The what-ifs that ate you alive, the endless loop of moments you could have changed, should have changed, would have changed if only you'd known. That night, I heard his footsteps again outside the nursery, but this time, I was in the hallway, heading back from getting water from the kitchen, my own insomnia keeping me awake. We nearly collided outside the nursery door, both of us stopping short in the darkness. Lorenzo stopped so suddenly, I almost walked into him, looked at me with surprise, like he'd forgotten I lived here, like he'd forgotten anyone was watching. Up close I could see the exhaustion carved into his face like words into stone, the stubble on his hay that suggested he'd stopped caring about appearances, the wrinkles around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago, new lines that grief had etched into his skin. "They're sleeping," I said quietly, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't wake them. All three, been down for 2 hours straight. Something flickered in his expression at the news, something almost like hope. "You have a gift," he said, and it didn't sound like a compliment so much as an accusation. "I just show up. That's not a gift. That's the baseline." My voice came out sharper than I intended, frustration breaking through. 9 others showed up. They all left. He said it like a challenge, like he was waiting for me to prove him right. They left because it was hard, because it hurt too much to stay, not because it was impossible. I held his gaze, refusing to back down. He was quiet for a moment, studying my face in the dim hallway light. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "I heard them laughing today, through the monitor in my office." My heart squeezed at the admission, at the vulnerability beneath the words. Marco figured out peekaboo. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world, laughed until he couldn't breathe. "I haven't heard them laugh since." He stopped, his throat working, swallowed hard. "Since she died." 6 months of silence. "They're healing, slowly. But they are." I paused, gathering courage. "They ask for you. You know, well, Marco does most. He says Papa and looks at the door like you might walk through it." Lorenzo's jaw tightened, muscle jumping under skin. His hands clenched at his sides like he was fighting not to hit something. "I can't, or won't?" I pushed, knowing I was crossing a line but unable to stop myself. His eyes met mine, dark and dangerous, warning me I was treading on forbidden ground. "Careful, Miss Brooks. They need their father, not just money and a house." My voice rose slightly despite my efforts to keep it steady. "They need someone who can look at them without seeing their mother dying on the floor." The rawness in his voice stopped me cold, made me realize this wasn't avoidance born of indifference but of survival. The rawness in his voice stopped me, made me realize this wasn't avoidance. This was survival. He wasn't staying away because he didn't care. He was staying away because he cared too much. "She gave them her eyes," I said softly, trying a different approach. "But that's not all she gave them. She gave them you, your strength, your protection. You don't understand what you're talking about." His voice was cold, dismissive, but I heard the pain beneath it. "I understand grief better than you think. I understand guilt. I understand wanting to run from the people you love because loving them hurts too much." I thought of my mother, of the 6 months I'd wasted avoiding her memory, of the 6 months I'd wasted running, hiding, pretending. But running doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes you miss everything while you're gone. Lorenzo stared at me, something shifting in his expression, anger at my presumption, recognition of truth he didn't want to hear, maybe both, warring for dominance in his carefully controlled features. "You've been here 1 week. You think you know what I need." His voice was dangerous, quiet in the way that preceded violence. "No, but I know what they need. And right now that's more important than protecting yourself from pain." The words came out harsh, but true. He stepped closer, invading my space. Too close. I could smell his cologne, expensive and dark, cedar and something darker, something that made my breath catch. Could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, could count the days of stubble on his jaw. "Be careful, Hazel." My name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine despite the warning in his tone. "You're getting attached to them, to this life, to things you shouldn't want." "Would that be so terrible?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes. Because this world, my world, destroys everything good that enters it." He said it with certainty, like he'd seen it happen too many times to count. "It destroyed her. It will destroy you too if you stay." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the hallway with my heart pounding. Left me standing in the hallway, heart pounding, mind racing, wondering what he'd meant, wondering what world he lived in that destroyed good things. That night, I couldn't sleep even though the children were quiet. I kept thinking about his words, about the warning in his voice that had sounded more like begging, about the warning in his voice, about the way he'd said my name like it meant something, about the way he'd said my name like it meant something, like I was already more than just the nanny. At 2 a.m, Sophia started crying, pulling me from thoughts that were getting too dangerous. I went to the nursery, my feet knowing the path in the dark, picked her up, started rocking her with practiced movements. The door opened behind me, making my heart jump. Lorenzo stood there in the darkness, still in his suit, like he'd been working all night, like sleep was something other people did, like he'd been working all night, never changing, never resting. I heard her, he said quietly, explaining his presence like he owed me an explanation. She had a nightmare. I think she remembers more than we realize. I kept my voice soft, not wanting to startle Sophia back into full wakefulness. He stepped into the room with hesitant movements. Closer, stopped a few feet away like there was an invisible line he couldn't cross. Sophia lifted her head from my shoulder, sensing the change in the room, saw him standing there in the shadows. "Papa," she whispered, the word barely audible but devastating in its hope. Lorenzo's face cracked at the sound of her voice. Just for a second, his careful control shattering. Then he rebuilt the walls brick by brick, shutting down the emotion I'd glimpsed. "Go back to sleep, Pakala," he said, his voice gentle despite the walls. His voice was gentle, broken, carrying more love than I'd heard from him before. Broken, carrying all the love he couldn't show. Sophia reached for him with both small hands, little arms stretching toward her father, little arms stretching out, reaching across the distance he'd built between them. I saw his hands tremble at the gesture, saw him want to move forward and force himself to stay back, The war playing out in his rigid shoulders, like invisible chains, held him in place, kept him from what he wanted most. "She won't break," I said softly, offering him permission he couldn't give himself. "I promise." He looked at me for a long moment, weighing my words, then at his daughter, reaching for him, at those green eyes watching him with hope and confusion, not understanding why Papa wouldn't come closer. Slowly, like it physically hurt, like every step was agony, he stepped forward, like it physically hurt, like he was walking through fire, took Sophia from my arms, his hands gentle despite their trembling. She immediately curled into his chest like she'd been waiting for this moment, grabbed his tie with tiny fists, sighed with contentment, all the tension leaving her small body. Lorenzo closed his eyes, his face a mask of pain and relief. His arms tightened around her, one hand cradling her head, like she was made of glass, like she might shatter if he held her wrong. "Nuidio," he whispered, and I didn't need to understand Italian to hear the emotion. "You're so big, you've grown so much." It hit me then with the force of revelation. He hadn't held them since the funeral, hadn't let himself be close enough to really see them, to notice they'd changed, to watch them grow. He'd missed 6 months of their lives, 6 months of growth and change. He'd missed 6 months of their lives, because he couldn't survive the pain of their mother's eyes looking back at him, haunting him with what he'd lost. We stood there in the dark nursery, the only sound their breathing, Sophia falling asleep against her father's chest, safe at last. Nico and Marco breathing softly in their cribs, unaware of this moment of breakthrough. "Thank you," Lorenzo said finally, his voice rough with unshed tears, "for staying, for not giving up on them." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, it with more confidence than I felt, making a promise I hoped I could keep. He looked at me over Sophia's head, his dark eyes searching my face. "They all said that. Every single one of them, standing where you are now. I'm not them." 3 words, simple and true, carrying all the certainty I had. Something in his eyes changed. The ice cracking, softened. "No, you're not." He said it like he was just realizing it, like he was seeing me for the first time. He gently placed Sophia back in her crib, moving with exaggerated care. She didn't wake, just curled around my mother's bear, and sighed, content. Lorenzo stood there looking at her for a long moment, then at Nico sleeping with his mouth slightly open, then Marco, sprawled across his mattress like he'd fought sleep and lost. "They have her smile," he said quietly, and I heard wonder in his voice instead of just pain. I didn't notice before, was too afraid to look closely. But Marco, when he laughs, it's her smile exactly. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked carefully, giving him room to feel whatever he needed to feel. "I don't know yet." Honest, raw, real in a way he hadn't been before. He turned to leave, always leaving. Stopped at the door with his hand on the frame. "Hazel, the question Valentina asked you, about whether anyone would look for you." His voice was serious. All business again. My stomach tightened with sudden dread. "Yes?"
That wasn't about the job. That was about my world, the one I live in. About the danger that comes with this family. With me. He looked back at me, his face half in shadow.
"You should be afraid of what I am. You should leave while you still can." "But I won't." The words came out steady despite the fear trying to claw its way up my throat. "Why?" He sounded genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why anyone would choose this. I looked at the 3 sleeping children, at the life I'd found in ruins, at the life I'd found in the middle of someone else's grief, building something new from broken pieces. Because for the first time in 6 months, I have a reason to wake up in the morning. Simple truth. The most honest thing I'd said to anyone in months. Because they need me. Because maybe you do too. Lorenzo stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then nodded once. Accepting. Something. Then nodded once. Some decision made. "Then welcome to the family, Hazel Brooks." His voice carried weight, like he was making it official. "God help you for what you've chosen." He left, and I knew in my bones that everything had just changed. And I knew, somewhere deep in my bones, that everything had just changed between us. That I'd crossed some line I hadn't seen, stepped into something I didn't fully understand. That whatever came next would be different from what came before. 2 weeks in, and I finally ventured beyond the nursery and my room, finally allowed myself to explore the house that had become my prison, and my sanctuary. The house was massive, a sprawling estate that seemed to go on forever. I'd only seen a fraction of it, only the corridors between my room and the children's, the path I walked a dozen times each night. That morning, while the children napped and Valentina watched them with the security of the baby monitor, I explored the spaces I'd been too exhausted to notice. The library with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books in 3 languages. The formal dining room with a table that could seat 20, looking like it had never been used. A gym that looked like it belonged in a professional facility. Equipment that probably cost more than a car. Everything pristine. Untouched, perfect. Everything expensive. Everything carefully chosen. Everything meaningless without the people who should be filling these rooms with life. I found his office by accident, drawn by an open door I'd passed a dozen times without noticing. The door was cracked open, a sliver of light spilling into the dark hallway. I shouldn't have gone in. Every instinct telling me this was a boundary I shouldn't cross. Should have kept walking. Should have respected his privacy. Should have stayed in my lane. But I saw the photographs on the wall. Black and white images in expensive frames. Lorenzo, younger, standing with men in suits that screamed money and power. Serious faces, cold eyes. The kind of photo that looked important in a way I couldn't quite define. The kind of photo that looked important, that spoke of power and danger and things I didn't understand. I stepped inside, crossing a threshold I couldn't uncross. His desk was organized with military precision, nothing out of place. Leather chair, laptop closed, papers in neat stacks that suggested a mind that needed order. On the credenza behind it, more photos. These ones personal, intimate. Lorenzo and a woman, the 2 of them looking at each other like nothing else existed. Beautiful woman with dark hair cascading down her back. Dark hair, olive skin, that glowed with health, and those eyes that haunted this house. Green with golden flecks, the eyes that lived on in 3 small faces. Sarah. This was Sarah, the ghost that haunted every room. She was laughing in the photo, her head thrown back with joy. Lorenzo's arm around her waist, looking at her like she was his entire world, like the sun rose and set in her smile, looking at her like she was his entire world, like nothing else mattered, like he'd found everything he'd ever needed. My chest ached looking at them, at the happiness that had been stolen, for him who'd lost this love, for her who'd died too young, for those 3 babies who'd never know how much their parents had loved each other, who'd never see their mother laugh like that. I turned to leave, suddenly feeling like an intruder in a sacred space. That's when I saw it sitting on the side table, half hidden under other papers. A newspaper on the side table, the masthead in Italian. Italian. I couldn't read most of it, the words swimming together. I couldn't read most of it, but I recognized one word that appeared again and again. Ricci. Lorenzo's name, appearing over and over. And below it, a photo that made my blood run cold. Lorenzo, but different from the man I knew. Harder, colder, more dangerous. Flanked by men in dark suits who looked like they could kill without blinking. The headline used words I did recognize, words I'd heard in movies, in news reports about organized crime. 'Ndrangheta, Calabria, words that meant violence, that meant crime, that meant a world I'd never touched. My blood went cold as understanding crashed over me. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, my fingers fumbling on the screen, searched his name, adding the word I was afraid to think. Lorenzo Ricci, 'Ndrangheta, holding my breath as I waited for results. The results flooded in, article after article, more than I could process. Articles in English, Italian, German, reports from newspapers and investigative journalists, suspected connections to organized crime, his name appearing in investigations that went nowhere, investigations that never went anywhere, charges that never stuck, witnesses who recanted their testimony, a family business that stretched back 3 generations, roots that went deeper than I could imagine, a legacy of violence and power that had shaped this man from birth. Mafia. The word felt heavy in my mind, weighted with everything I thought I knew about the world. Not suspected, I realized as I read article after article, not rumored. The articles were careful, legally worded to avoid lawsuits. But between the lines, the truth was clear as day to anyone who knew how to read it. The truth was clear. This man, the father whose children I was raising, was part of the Italian mafia, part of a criminal organization that operated outside the law. The man whose children I was raising, the man who'd held his daughter in the darkness last night, the man who'd looked at me like I was saving his life. The man who'd looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting, like I was part of something important, was a criminal. A killer. If these articles were right, a man who hurt people for money and power. Find what you were looking for. The voice behind me made me jump, my phone clattering to the desk. I spun around, my heart in my throat. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, blocking my only exit. Still in his suit, despite the afternoon hour, face unreadable. A mask of calm that was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. Face unreadable. Those dark eyes watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. My mouth went dry, words dying in my throat. I didn't mean to. I was just... The lie died on my lips, pathetic and obvious. Snooping? He stepped inside with predatory grace, closed the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison door locking, or finally getting smart, and figuring out what you've walked into. His voice was calm, almost amused, like this had been inevitable. Are you going to hurt me? The question came out before I could stop it, my most primal fear given voice. The question came out before I could stop it, raw and scared. Something flashed in his eyes at my words, quick as lightning, anger that I'd think that, maybe hurt, that I'd had to ask. If I wanted to hurt you, Hazel, you'd already be dead. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Like ending lives was as simple as breathing. The casual way he said it made my knees weak, made me understand how different his world was from mine, made me understand that I was standing in a room with someone who could kill me and no one would ever know. He moved closer, not threatening but somehow more menacing for the control in his movements. Not threatening, at least not overtly, just present, taking up all the space in the room, making the air feel thinner, harder to breathe, taking up all the space in the room, his presence overwhelming despite the expensive office, despite the civilized trappings of wealth and power. Valentina asked if anyone would look for you. Remember that question. His voice was patient, like he was explaining something to a child. Now you know why. He watched me carefully, reading every micro-expression. My world is dangerous, more dangerous than you can imagine. The people I do business with are dangerous, violent, unpredictable, and now you're connected to me. To my name, to my family, to my children who carry my blood, to my family, and in my world that means you're a target, too. What kind of business? I asked, even though I already knew, even though the articles had told me everything. The kind you don't ask about. His voice was hard, final, a wall I couldn't breach. The kind that doesn't appear in my tax returns. The kind that requires armed guards and secret addresses? I pushed, needing to hear him say it, needing him to confirm what I'd read. Yes. One word, no elaboration, no justification, just acknowledgement. I should run. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to run. Should pack my bag and call that Uber and never look back, never think about this place again. Should call the police. Should report what I'd seen. Should do the right thing. Instead, I thought of Nico's small hand holding mine this morning, of Sophia finally sleeping through the night, her face peaceful instead of haunted, of Marco's laugh that sounded like his mother's smile, pure and joyful and worth protecting, of the 3 children upstairs who needed me more than they needed safety, who'd already lost too much. I'm not leaving, I said, the words coming out stronger than I felt. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. You should be terrified right now, should be running for your life. I am terrified. I met his gaze, refusing to look away. But not of you. Not anymore. Then you're a fool, Hazel. He said my name like a curse, like a warning I wasn't heeding. Maybe I am. I met his gaze, held it even though everything in me wanted to look away. But those children need me more than I need to be smart, and I think, maybe you do too. His jaw tightened, muscle jumping under skin. This isn't a romance novel, Hazel. This isn't a story with a happy ending. This is real life, my real life, and it's ugly and violent. My real life where people die, where loyalty is rewarded and betrayal is punished with death. People die in my world. Good people, innocent people, people who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. People die in mine too. My voice shook but held. I'm a nurse, remember? I've held children while they took their last breath, watched families destroyed by cancer and accidents and random cruelty. My voice shook but I kept going. I've seen death up close, seen what it does to the people left behind. At least here, I'm saving them instead of losing them, making a difference instead of watching helplessly. He stared at me. Really looked at me. Like he was trying to figure out if I was brave or stupid, if I understood what I was choosing, or if I was deluding myself. Like he was trying to figure out if I was brave or stupid, trying to see what I was made of underneath. You can't save everyone, no matter how hard you try. He said it, quietly, like he'd learned this lesson the hard way, like he carried the weight of everyone he couldn't save. No, you're right about that. I acknowledge the truth of it, but I can save them, those 3 babies upstairs, and right now that's enough for me. That's all I need. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching between us. Then he moved to his desk, opened a drawer with a key. He pulled from his pocket, pulled out a phone, sleek and black and expensive looking, handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine.
What's this?
I asked, turning it over in my hands. Secure phone, untraceable, encrypted, only 3 numbers programmed. Mine, Valentina's, and my head of security, who happens to also be named Marco. His voice was all business now, giving instructions. Marco? Like your son? The coincidence seemed strange. Named after my father, who trained me, who taught me everything I know, who is also my head of security because I trust family above all else. He paused, making sure I understood the weight of this. If anything happens, anything at all, if anyone comes here who shouldn't be here, if you feel unsafe for even 1 second, if your instincts tell you something is wrong, you call this number, and my father will handle it. You call immediately. I took the phone, feeling the weight of it. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than any phone should feel, like a promise that couldn't be taken back, like a chain binding me to this world, to him, to choices I couldn't undo, like accepting this meant accepting everything that came with it. Nothing will happen to you, or my children. Lorenzo continued, his voice carrying absolute conviction. I'll make sure of it. I stake my life on it. How can you promise that? I asked, needing to understand how anyone could make that guarantee. Because anyone who touches what's mine dies screaming. He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, like he was discussing a business policy, not murder. So matter-of-factly, like violence was just another tool in his arsenal. Like he was talking about the weather, like causing pain and death was as natural as breathing. He said it so simply, so calmly, like he was talking about the weather or the stock market. Like violence was just another business tool. I should be horrified. Should be backing away from this man who casually discussed murder. Should be running, screaming, calling the police. Should be running for my life. But all I felt was a strange sense of safety washing over me. Safe. For the first time since my mother died. For the first time since that night in the hospital when I'd failed. Since that night in the hospital when everything fell apart. I felt protected. Like nothing could touch me while I was under his watch. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly protected. What am I to you? I asked, needing to understand my place in this world. Really? Am I just the nanny, just an employee? Lorenzo's eyes darkened at the question, something shifting in his expression. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to look at him, close enough that I could see the individual whiskers of his stubble, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You're the woman who made my children laugh again after 6 months of silence, who sleeps on the floor between their cribs because you're afraid they'll wake up and you won't hear them fast enough, who gives them pieces of yourself, pieces of your own grief and pain, to help them heal from theirs. His voice was intense, focused entirely on me. His hand came up slowly, telegraphing the movement, brushed a strand of hair from my face with infinite gentleness. The touch sent electricity down my spine, made my breath catch in my throat, made me hyper-aware of how close he was, how alone we were. The touch sent electricity down my spine, made every nerve ending come alive. You're not just anything, Hazel Brooks. His thumb traced my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. And that's the problem. That's what makes this dangerous. Why is it a problem? My voice came out barely above a whisper, my heart racing. Because I don't want to need you, don't want to depend on anyone ever again. Don't want to look forward to coming home because you'll be here instead of dreading these empty halls. Don't want to watch the monitors in my office just to see you smile at my children. Just to see proof that they're okay, that you're still here. His confession came out rough, like the words were being pulled from him against his will. My breath caught at the admission. You watch the monitors? I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed was different. Every day, every spare moment, all day, when I should be working, when I should be focused on business. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the touch sending shivers through me. I see everything you do, every moment of care. The way you rock Sophia when she's scared, singing that same lullaby until she relaxes. The way you let Nico take his time trusting you, never pushing, never demanding. The way you hold Marco like he's precious, like he's worth all your patience, like he matters more than anything. They are precious, all three of them. The words came out automatically. Truth I'd lived every day for 2 weeks. So are you? The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. So are you? More than you know. More than I should let myself feel. The words hung between us like a confession. Heavy, dangerous, changing everything. With 3 simple words. Lorenzo. His name came out like a prayer, like a plea. I know. He dropped his hand. Stepped back, putting space between us. Stepped back, breaking the spell, rebuilding the walls. This is inappropriate. This crosses every line. You work for me. You're here for them, not me. Not for whatever this is between us. He dropped his hand, stepped back. You're here for them, not me. But I need you to understand something. Need you to know what you're getting into. You're under my protection now. Officially. Completely. That means you're mine to protect, mine to keep safe, mine in a way that has nothing to do with employment. That means you're mine to protect. No one touches you without answering to me. No one threatens you. No one even looks at you wrong without consequences. His voice was steel, a promise and a threat rolled into one. That sounds like possession, not protection. I forced myself to say it, to call out what I was hearing. His smile was dark, dangerous, predatory, dangerous, predatory, in a way that should have scared me but somehow didn't. In my world, there's no difference. The two are the same thing. He stepped back to his desk, creating distance. In my world, what you protect, you own. What you own, you defend with your life. A cry came through the baby monitor on his desk, cutting through the tension. Marco's voice, scared and needing comfort. The moment broke like glass shattering. Lorenzo looked at the monitor, then at me, the spell between us broken. You should go, he said, his voice rough. Before I do something we'll both regret. before I forget why you're really here. I grabbed the phone, my fingers closing around it, walked to the door on unsteady legs, stopped with my hand on the doorknob. One last thing needing to be said. I'm not afraid of you. The words came out stronger than I felt. Defiant. You should be. His voice was dark, warning me one last time. Why? Because you're dangerous, because you've killed people, because you operate outside the law. No. His eyes locked on mine, dark and intense. His eyes locked on mine, and I saw something vulnerable beneath the danger. Because I'm starting to care about you, and that's the most dangerous thing of all. Because when I care about someone, I become something worse than a criminal. I become someone who will burn the world down to keep them safe. I left before I could respond, before I could process what he'd just admitted. Went to the nursery on autopilot, picked up Marco and held him close, feeling his small heart beat against mine, grounding myself in something real and pure. But all I could think about was the way Lorenzo had looked at me in that office, like I was something worth protecting, worth possessing, worth risking everything for, like I was something worth keeping. Even in a world as dark as his, worth risking everything for, even his carefully constructed walls. And I realized, with terrifying clarity that should have sent me running, that I felt exactly the same way about him, that I'd choose this danger over safety, choose this complicated man over simplicity, choose to stay even knowing what he was. It happened 3 days later, shattering the illusion of safety I'd been building. I was in the garden with the children, taking advantage of a warm afternoon, finally getting them outside, into sunshine and fresh air, finally getting them outside after days of rain. Nico was examining a flower with the intense concentration only toddlers could manage. Sophia was sitting in the grass, content, pulling up blades and letting them fall. Marco was in my lap, playing with my bracelet, trying to get it off my wrist with determined little fingers. Perfect. Peaceful. Normal in a way that made me forget where I was, what this family was. Then Valentina appeared at the back door, her face pale with fear. Moving fast, faster than I'd ever seen her move. Her face was pale, eyes wide with something that looked like terror. Eyes wide with fear. Her professional composure completely shattered. Inside, now, her voice was sharp, urgent, leaving no room for questions. I didn't question it. Didn't hesitate. Years of emergency room training kicked in. Muscle memory from codes and crashes. Years of emergency room training kicked in. My body responding before my brain processed the danger. I scooped up Marco with one arm, grabbed Sophia's hand with the other. Miko, come on baby. We're going inside right now. He must have heard the urgency in my voice, must have sensed the danger in the air. He ran to me immediately without the usual toddler negotiation, his little legs pumping as fast as they could. Valentina ushered us through the door with shaking hands, locked it behind us with 3 separate locks. I hadn't noticed before, locked it with shaking hands. Upstairs. The panic room. End of the hall. Behind the bookshelf. What's happening? I asked. Even as I was moving, even as I was already running. Just go. Now. Don't stop for anything. Her voice cracked with fear, with urgency that made my blood run cold. I ran down the hallway with 3 babies, adrenaline giving me strength. 3 babies, 1 in my arms, 2 trying to keep up with my pace. 1 in my arms, 2 trying to keep up, their little legs working as fast as they could. Down the hallway, towards safety. I'd never thought I'd need. I found the bookshelf at the end of the hall, just where she'd said, pulled it, grateful when it swung open smoothly, revealing the hidden room. A room I'd never seen before, never knew existed. Steel walls, industrial, purpose-built. Steel walls that spoke of serious threats, of dangers that required this level of protection. Monitors showing every angle of the property, multiple screens displaying different cameras, supplies stacked neatly on shelves, water in large containers, a phone on the wall, red and ominous, a phone on the wall, emergency hotline to security. I got the children inside, my hands shaking. Miko was crying now, scared by my fear. Sophia too, feeding off the tension. Marco clung to my neck hard enough to hurt, his little fingers digging into my skin. It's okay. We're safe now. We're playing hide and seek. Just a game. We have to be very quiet so we can win. I forced my voice to stay calm, cheerful, even as my heart raced. I looked at the monitors, my hands shaking as I scanned the screens. Black SUVs were pulling up to the front gate. 4 of them, sleek and expensive and menacing. 4 of them, more than I could count. Men getting out dressed in tactical gear, not trying to hide, armed with weapons I couldn't identify but knew were designed to kill, moving with military precision. My stomach dropped, ice flooding my veins. This was real. This was happening. This was the danger Lorenzo had warned me about. The secure phone Lorenzo had given me was in my pocket, exactly where I'd kept it since he gave it to me. I pulled it out with trembling fingers, nearly dropped it, called him, pressing the button for his number. He answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. "Where are you?" His voice was sharp, all business, the man from the articles instead of the father from the nursery. "Panic room like Valentina said. Valentina told us to run. There are men outside. Lots of them." My voice shook despite my efforts to control it. "How many?" His voice was sharp, commanding, the man who ran a criminal empire. I counted on the monitors, my eyes darting between screens. 8. Maybe 10, I can't tell. They have guns. Big ones. Military-looking. I heard him barking orders to someone in rapid Italian, his voice hard and commanding. Then his voice, deadly calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than anger. Then his voice, deadly calm, the calm of someone who'd done this before. "Listen to me carefully, Hazel. Stay in that room. No matter what you hear. Do not open the door for anyone except me or Valentina. No one else. Not even if they say I sent them. Do you understand me?" "Lorenzo, what's happening? Who are these people?" My voice cracked with fear. "Rivals from Calabria. Someone trying to send a message, trying to prove they're not afraid of me." He paused, and I heard gunfire starting on his end. "They won't get to you, or my children. I promise you that on my life." Gunfire erupted, the sound coming through the phone and through the walls. Gunfire erupted, loud enough to hear through the steel walls, through the panic room that was supposed to be safe. I could hear it through the phone and through the walls. Surround sound of violence. The children screamed at the sound. A primal fear they were too young to understand, but old enough to feel. I pulled them close, covered their ears with my hands, trying to shield them from sounds no child should hear. "Lorenzo!" I screamed into the phone, terror making my voice shrill. "I'm 10 minutes away. On my way with reinforcements. 10 minutes, Hazel. Just hold on. Keep them safe and quiet. I'm coming." The line went dead before I could respond, before I could beg him to hurry, before I could tell him I was terrified. The line went dead, leaving me alone with 3 terrified children and the sound of gunfire. I looked at the monitors, unable to look away. Lorenzo's security was engaging the attackers, men in suits returning fire, but there were so many of them. Overwhelming numbers. But there were so many of them. Too many. An army against a handful of guards. They were spreading out systematically, surrounding the house with military precision. Surrounding the house like they'd planned this. Like they knew exactly what they were doing. One of them was heading for the back entrance. The door we'd just come through, where we'd just been 5 minutes ago. Where the children had been playing in the grass, defenseless and exposed. Where the children had been playing completely exposed. If Valentina had been 30 seconds slower, if I'd argued about going inside, if I'd stopped to grab a toy, they'd be dead. We'd all be dead. My hands shook violently as I held Nico, Sophia, and Marco as tight as I could. I held Nico, Sophia, and Marco as tight as I could, without hurting them, trying to shield them with my body, like flesh could stop bullets, sang to them over the sound of gunfire, my voice cracking, that lullaby my mother used to sing, the one that usually calmed them, the one that had comforted them before, now a desperate attempt to give them something normal in the middle of chaos. "Hush, little babies. Don't say a word." The words came out broken, barely a melody, but I kept singing. More gunfire echoed through the house. Closer now, making the children scream louder. The children were sobbing, terrified beyond anything I could soothe. Terrified in a way that would leave scars, in a way that therapy couldn't fully heal. This was his world, the reality I'd chosen to ignore. Violence, danger, death as casual as breathing, death waiting around every corner, ready to take everything away in an instant. And I'd brought 3 innocent children into the middle of it. No, they'd been born into it, born into this life of violence and fear. They'd been born into it, marked from birth as targets. I'd just been naive enough to think I could protect them. Naive enough to think love was enough. Naive enough to believe we could be safe. Minutes passed like hours, each second stretching into eternity. The shooting continued, the sound becoming almost rhythmic, a deadly heartbeat. I watched the monitors with wide eyes, unable to look away. Saw Lorenzo's men taking positions, fighting back, saw bodies falling. Couldn't tell whose side they were on. Didn't want to know. Couldn't tell whose side they were on. Each death a person. Each person someone's son or father or brother. This was real. Not a movie. Not a story. This was happening to us. Here, now. This was happening to the children I'd promised to protect. The children I'd sworn I wouldn't let down. The door to the panic room was steel. Bulletproof, according to Lorenzo. Bulletproof. Reinforced. Designed to survive an assault. But all I could think was, what if they get through? What if Lorenzo doesn't make it in time? What if I have to watch these babies die? Because I was too stupid to leave when I had the chance. What if I have to watch these babies die? Watch the light go out of those green eyes, become the last person they see before the end. Then the monitors showed more vehicles arriving. Bigger, more of them. Lorenzo's reinforcements. Cavalry arriving at the last possible moment. Bigger SUVs. Armored vehicles that looked military. More of them, a small army responding to the attack. And Lorenzo himself, getting out of the lead vehicle, gun in hand, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Moving with terrifying precision, every step calculated, every motion efficient. Moving like a predator, like death itself, like something more than human. I'd never seen him like this before. Had only seen glimpses of this man in photos. Not the grieving father struggling with loss. Not the careful businessman in expensive suits. This was the man the newspapers wrote about. The man whose name appeared in investigations. The man other criminals feared. The one people feared. The one who built an empire on blood and loyalty and ruthless violence. He was lethal, terrifying, beautiful in his violence. The attackers fell back, trying to retreat now that the odds had shifted. Tried to retreat, but Lorenzo's men had them surrounded, trapped them like animals. But Lorenzo's men had them surrounded, cutting off every escape route, turning hunters into prey. It was over in minutes, the violence ending as suddenly as it started, brutal, efficient, final in a way that left no room for mercy or second chances. Final in a way that told me exactly what Lorenzo had meant when he said anyone who touched what was his died screaming. The secure phone rang in my hand, making me jump. I answered it with shaking hands, could barely hold it steady. "It's safe now. I'm coming up to get you." Lorenzo's voice was calm, like he'd just finished a business meeting instead of a gunfight. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, purposeful, quick, the knock on the door. "Hazel, it's me. You can open the door now." I opened it on trembling legs, barely able to stand. Lorenzo stood there, suit jacket gone, shirt untucked and torn, gun still in his hand, comfortable with it. He had blood on him, spattered across his white shirt, on his face. I didn't know if it was his. Didn't want to know. Couldn't process what it meant if it wasn't. He looked at me first, checking for injuries. Then at the children, his face cracking when he saw them. His face cracked when he saw them. Huddled together, traumatized and terrified. Their world shattered again. "Are you hurt? Any injuries?" His hands were on me, checking, professional and thorough. I shook my head. Couldn't form words. Couldn't speak. Couldn't think. Couldn't process what had just happened. He holstered the gun. The motion automatic. Stepped inside the panic room. Pulled all 4 of us into his arms, surrounding us with his body. The children cried into his chest. Their small bodies shaking. I felt his heart pounding. Adrenaline still racing through his system. The aftermath of violence. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this happened," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this. So sorry I couldn't prevent it. So sorry I brought this danger into your life. Are they gone? Are we safe now?" My voice came out small, childlike, seeking reassurance. I wasn't sure he could give. "They won't be coming back." His voice carried absolute certainty. "Ever." I made sure of that. The finality in his voice told me everything, confirmed what I'd suspected. The finality in his voice told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a warning issued. This was an execution carried out, a message sent in blood and bodies. This was an execution, permanent and brutal. Marco pulled back, his little face streaked with tears, looked at his father covered in blood and violence. "Papa scary," he said it with the honesty only children possessed, naming the fear we all felt. Lorenzo's eyes filled with tears at his son's words. "I know, Piccolo. I know I'm scary. I know what I am." His voice cracked with pain, but Marco reached for him anyway. Despite the blood, despite the fear, wanted to be held anyway. Because even covered in blood, even terrifying, he was still Papa. Because even covered in blood, even terrifying, even capable of the violence they'd just witnessed, he was still Papa, still the person who mattered most. Because biology and love transcended fear. Because children forgave what adults couldn't. Sophia and Nico crawled into his arms too, all three of them seeking comfort from the man who'd just killed to protect them. All three of them choosing him. Choosing him despite the violence, despite everything they'd just witnessed. Despite everything. Because he was still their father, still the person who made them feel safe. Lorenzo looked at me over their heads, his dark eyes haunted. "You should leave. Get out while you still can. This life. It's not safe. Not for you. Not for anyone who isn't born into it." Today proved it beyond any doubt. His voice was hollow, defeated in a way I'd never heard. "Where would I go? What life do I have waiting for me?" My voice was flat, stating, "Anywhere you want. I'll set you up with a new identity, new city, new name, enough money to start over, money to live comfortably, whatever you need to disappear, to be safe from my world." He was offering me an escape, one last chance to run. And then, what about the children? I gestured to the 3 babies in his arms. "I'll find someone else, someone who isn't a target, someone who doesn't have a target on their back because of me, someone who won't die because they made the mistake of caring about my children." His voice was bitter, self-loathing evident in every word. I stared at him, at this man who'd just killed for his family. At this man who'd just killed for his family, who was now offering to let me walk away, offering me safety, even if it meant losing the one person who'd brought stability to his children's lives, who was now offering to let me walk away, to save me from himself. "No," the word came out firm, certain, carrying all the conviction I had left. "Hazel," he started to argue, to convince me. "No," I cut him off, my voice stronger now. "I'm not leaving them, not when they need me most. I'm not leaving you, not after everything. People died today. Could have died. People could have died, including you. You, my children. The bullets don't care who they hit." His voice rose with frustration. "But we didn't die. Because of you. Because you protected us. Because you protected us. Because you got here in time. Because you were willing to kill to keep us safe. Next time I might not be fast enough. Might not arrive in time." The fear in his voice was real, raw, human beneath the monster. "Then we'll be careful. We'll follow protocols. We'll be smart about security. But I'm not running. Not from this. Not from you." My voice was steel now, matching. Lorenzo's jaw tightened, his frustration evident. "Why? Why would you stay in this hell? You're smart, educated. You could have any life you wanted. Why would you stay in this?" I looked at the 3 babies in his arms, their tear-stained faces, at the man who'd terrified me and protected me in the same breath, who'd shown me darkness and light in equal measure, at the man who'd terrified me and protected me in the same breath. Because I love them. All 3 of them. Because they need me and I need them. Because you. I stopped, swallowed hard, gathering courage, because leaving would hurt more than staying. Because this broken family feels more like home than anything I've had in years. He stared at me, his dark eyes searching my face. Then so quietly I almost missed it. "You're insane. You're absolutely insane to choose this." "Probably. You're probably right." I admitted it freely. "You could die in my world," he said it bluntly, making sure I understood. "So could you. So could they. That's life, no matter where we are." I met his gaze steadily. "This isn't life, Hazel. This is war, constant and unending." "Then I guess I'm choosing sides, picking my battlefield." I held his gaze, refusing to back down. Lorenzo shifted the children in his arms, trying to hold all 3, stepped closer with his free hand. His free hand came up, cupped my face with surprising gentleness given the violence it had just committed, cupped my face, his palm warm against my cheek. "If you stay, you're mine, under my protection completely and permanently. My rules, My world. My life. You don't get to leave after this. You don't get to change your mind when things get hard again. His voice was intense, making sure I understood the commitment I was making. I know. I understand what I'm choosing. The words came out steady, despite my racing heart. And if anything happens to you because of me, because someone uses you to get to me, I'll never forgive myself. I'll burn the world down in revenge. But it won't bring you back. His voice cracked with emotion. Then don't let anything happen to me. I said it simply, putting my faith in him completely. Keep me safe. Keep us all safe. He kissed me then, hard and desperate. Hard. Desperate. Like he was trying to prove I was real, trying to convince himself this was happening. Like he was trying to prove I was real, that we'd survived, that I was still here choosing him despite everything, that we were all still alive, that I hadn't run, that I was choosing this hell with him. The children between us squirmed at the contact. Marco giggled. The sound incongruous after so much violence. Papa kiss Hazel. He announced it like a discovery, like something wonderful and new. Lorenzo pulled back, looked at his son, then at me with something like wonder. Something in his eyes had changed. I saw it clearly. Something in his eyes had changed. The ice melting. The walls were still there. Protection he'd built over years, but there were cracks now. Fissures letting light through. Light coming through. Hope breaking through despair. Welcome to the family, he said, making it official. For real this time, not just as an employee but as one of us. I smiled through my tears, tasting salt on my lips. Does this mean I get a raise? The joke fell flat, but I needed something normal, something light. He actually laughed, the sound broken but real, broken, exhausted. Real in a way nothing else had been today. You can have anything you want. Name your price. His voice was sincere, offering me the world. I just want this. Exactly what we have. You, them, exactly this. Nothing more, nothing less. Simple truth. The most honest thing I'd ever said. Even the gunfights? Even the violence and danger? He had to make sure I understood. Especially the gunfights, because they remind me what we're fighting for. I meant it. Understood now what this life meant. He shook his head, but he was smiling. And for the first time since I'd met him. Lorenzo Richter looked like he might actually be okay someday. For the first time since I'd met him. Lorenzo Richter looked like he might actually be okay, like the wounds might eventually scar instead of bleeding forever. We stayed in that panic room for another hour. None of us ready to leave. Just sitting together, the children gradually calming down. The children eventually calmed down, their fear fading as they realized we were safe. Started playing with toys from the supply shelf. Resilient in the way only children could be, bouncing back from trauma with frightening ease. Lorenzo kept his arm around me, his grip tight, like if he let go, I'd disappear. Like I might vanish if he loosened his hold. Like I might change my mind about staying, about choosing this life with him. My wife, he said quietly after a long silence. Sarah, she knew what I was, knew what I did for a living, knew the darkness I carried, and she loved me anyway, despite everything. Or maybe because she saw past it. His voice was raw, vulnerable, in a way I'd never heard. That must have been hard, loving someone dangerous. I said it carefully, trying to understand. She said it was easy, the easiest thing she'd ever done, that the danger didn't define me, that it was just what I did, not who I was, that I was more than what I did, more than the violence, more than the family business. He looked at me with haunted eyes. I didn't believe her then, thought she was naive, that she didn't truly understand, but maybe she saw something I couldn't. Maybe she was right about me. Maybe there's something worth saving. She was right. I said it with certainty, believing it completely. She was absolutely right. How do you know? You barely know me, he challenged, needing proof. Because I see the way you look at them, the love beneath the fear, the way you just killed for them, without hesitation, without thought for your own safety. That's not a monster. That's not evil. That's a father protecting his children. My voice was firm, convincing. Lorenzo's throat worked, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. They could have died today because of who I am, because of enemies I've made, because of choices I made before they were born. But they didn't die. I emphasized the reality over the possibility. Because you got them to safety in time. Because you didn't panic. Because your training kicked in. Because you did everything right. Because you You saved them, when I couldn't be here." His voice was thick with gratitude and guilt. "We saved them," I corrected him gently. "Together, you and me, working as a team." He pulled me closer, his embrace almost painful, kissed my forehead with surprising tenderness. "I don't deserve you after everything I've done, after the life I've lived." "Probably not," I agreed, making him laugh. "But you're stuck with me anyway, for better or worse." He laughed again, the sound more genuine, and I realized this was what love looked like in his world. This was what love looked like in the darkness. Not perfect or safe or clean, not safe, not simple, not easy, but real, raw, worth fighting for, worth risking everything, worth fighting for with every breath, worth dying for, if necessary, worth dying for, if it came to that. But more importantly, worth living for through the danger. Worth living for despite the fear, despite the violence, despite everything that made this choice insane. The nightmare started that night, arriving right on schedule like I should have expected. Not for me, though I had my own demons to face in the dark. For the children, their young minds unable to process what they'd experienced. All three of them woke up screaming at 2 a.m, their cries different from before, not the usual cries of hunger or wet diapers or normal toddler needs. These were terror screams, primal and desperate, the kind that came from somewhere deep and primal, from a place that remembered danger, from instincts that knew they'd almost died, primal sounds that spoke of trauma that went deeper than words, deeper than consciousness. I ran to the nursery, my feet pounding on expensive carpet. They were all standing in their cribs, their little bodies shaking uncontrollably. Shaking, their eyes wide with remembered fear, eyes wide searching the shadows for threats, looking for the danger they'd learned was real, expecting violence to appear from nowhere. "It's okay. I promise you're safe. You're safe. I'm here. No one's gonna hurt you." My voice shook despite my efforts to sound calm. But they didn't calm down like they usually did, not like before when my presence alone could soothe them. This was different, deeper, a wound that wouldn't heal with just my voice and my arms. Marco reached for me, but when I picked him up, he started hitting my chest. But when I picked him up, he started hitting my chest with small fists. Not hard, his tiny fists ineffective, just frantic, like he was fighting invisible enemies, like he didn't know what to do with the fear inside him. Like violence was the only response he knew to terror, like he was fighting off something I couldn't see, something that lived in his memory. Sophia had wet herself during the nightmare, was standing in it now, rocking violently. Rocking violently. Her self-soothing mechanism kicked into overdrive. Her eyes were somewhere else, far away. Somewhere I couldn't reach, somewhere safe inside her mind, where gunfire couldn't follow, somewhere I couldn't reach. No matter how much I tried, lost in a place only she knew. Nico was crying silently, the most disturbing sight of all, tears streaming down his face in rivers, that green gaze locked on the door with laser focus, waiting for the bad men to come back, expecting another attack. Unable to trust that safety was real, waiting for the bad men to come back, ready to fight or flee, a 2-year-old on guard duty. I'd done this. I realized with crushing guilt. I'd promised to keep them safe. And I'd brought them into a war zone. Exposed them to violence no child should witness, failed the one job that mattered most, failed in the one way that mattered, let them be traumatized on my watch. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway right behind me. He'd been sleeping down the hall now, closer to us. Closer, refusing to be far away after yesterday. Unwilling to be far from his children ever again. "Let me help you." He didn't wait for permission, just moved into action. Together we changed them into clean clothes, got them clean with gentle hands. Neither of us speaking, tried to soothe them with soft words and softer touches. With soft words that fell on deaf ears, with touches that couldn't penetrate their fear. But they wouldn't sleep, their bodies too wired with adrenaline. Every sound made them jump like they'd been shot. Every shadow made them cry like death was lurking, like death itself was coming for them, like safety was an illusion that could shatter at any moment. At 4 a.m, Lorenzo and I sat on the floor between their cribs like exhausted soldiers after battle. All 3 children were in our laps. Finally quiet but not sleeping. Finally quiet but not sleeping. Not trusting sleep, just existing that space between awake and too afraid to close their eyes. Just existing in limbo. Too scared to sleep, too tired to stay awake, trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't end. "This is my fault," Lorenzo said, his voice hollow with self-loathing. His voice was hollow, empty of everything but guilt. "I brought this into their lives before they were born, cursed them with my name and my blood." "You didn't choose this for them," I said, trying to ease his guilt even though I understood it. "I chose this life before they existed. Before Sarah, before I knew what love was. I chose power and money and violence, and now they're paying the price." He looked at his children with haunted eyes, and they're paying for it with their innocence, with their childhood, with their ability to feel safe in the world. I didn't know what to say to that. Because he was right, wasn't he? Because he was right. His choices had led to this, had put these children in danger. "Maybe you were right before," I said quietly, the words tasting like ash. "Maybe I should leave, run while I still can. Maybe they need someone who can give them a normal life without gunfire and panic rooms. Someone without blood on their hands or targets on their back. Someone who doesn't bring danger with them." Lorenzo's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide. "What?" "Look at them. Really look at them." I gestured to the 3 traumatized babies. "They're traumatized all over again because of us, because we couldn't protect them. Again, because of us, because we couldn't protect them from your world. No matter how hard we tried." My voice broke on the words. "They're traumatized because bad people exist in the world. Not because we failed, not because we didn't do enough." His voice was firm, refusing to accept my logic. "We did fail, though. I promised them safety. And yesterday they heard gunfire, and smelled smoke and felt real fear. They heard gunfire and I couldn't make it stop. They smelled smoke and I couldn't explain why. They felt real fear, and I had no comfort to give. Tears ran down my face unbidden. And you got them to the panic room before the bullets started flying. You kept them alive when death was seconds away." His voice was insistent, demanding I see the truth. "Alive isn't the same as safe, isn't the same as whole." The words came out bitter. Marco stirred in my lap, making a small sound that broke my heart. I looked down at him through blurred vision. His little hand was gripping my shirt with desperate strength. Even in his exhaustion, even traumatized and scared, he was holding on. Even in his exhaustion and fear, he was holding on like I was the only solid thing in a world that had tilted sideways. "They need more than I can give them," I whispered, the fear I'd been holding, the inadequacy crushing me. "I'm not enough to fix this, not enough to undo what they saw. They need you, exactly you, not someone else." Lorenzo's voice was firm, brooking no argument. "How do you know? How can you be sure?" I looked at him desperately, needing certainty. I didn't have. Lorenzo gestured to Marco's hand gripping my shirt, to Sophia leaning against my side even in her dissociation, to Miko's head on my shoulder even while he watched the door, to Sophia leaning against my side despite being lost inside herself, to Miko's head on my shoulder while his eyes stayed vigilant. Because even terrified, even broken, they choose you. They reach for you when they're scared. They trust you even when trust should be impossible. His voice was gentle, trying to make me see what he saw. "Trust isn't enough to heal them." I shook my head, rejecting the comfort he was offering. "It's everything. It's the foundation for everything else." His voice carried conviction. I couldn't share. "It's the foundation we build everything else on." I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears, felt the weight of 3 small bodies depending on me when I had nothing left to give, felt the weight of my own inadequacy crushing me. The certainty that I wasn't enough, would never be enough, crushing me, making it hard to breathe, making me wonder how I'd ever thought I could do this. "I can't do this anymore," I said, finally admitting it. The words I'd been holding back for hours, maybe days. "I'm not strong enough, not brave enough, not qualified for this level of trauma. I'm just a nurse who couldn't save her own mother, who failed in the ER, who almost killed a patient because she was too broken to focus, who ran away instead of facing her failures. What makes you think I can save them when I can't even save myself?" Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, letting my words hang in the air. Then he said, "The same thing that makes me think I can save them. The fact that we love them more than we fear failing them, that we're willing to try even when success seems impossible." His voice was soft but certain. I opened my eyes, looked at him through tears. "I'm terrified," he continued, his confession matching mine. "Every second of every day, I'm drowning in fear. Terrified I'll make the wrong call, and they'll pay for it. that my enemies will find a weakness and exploit it, that I'll lose them like I lost her, that I'll have to bury more people I love. His voice cracked with emotion, but I show up anyway. Every day, every night, because that's what love is, isn't it? Showing up even when you're scared, even when you might fail, even when success seems impossible. What if showing up isn't enough? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Then we fail together, we fall together, and we get up together. But at least we tried. At least we didn't abandon them when they needed us most. His voice was steel-wrapped in compassion. Miko lifted his head at our voices, looking at me with those devastating green eyes. His mother's eyes filled with his own fear. "Hazel, stay," he asked, his little voice shaking with vulnerability. My heart broke into smaller pieces. "I don't know, baby. I don't know if I'm strong enough." "Hazel, stay," he insisted, his voice rising with panic. Louder, panic creeping into his tone, his little voice shaking with desperate need. "Please, please stay, Hazel." Sophia reached for me too, coming out of her dissociation. "Stay, stay, no go." Simple words carrying all her fear. Marco started crying again, sensing the tension. "No go, no go, Hazel, no go." His small body shaking with sobs. They were falling apart in front of me, right in front of me, their fragile stability shattering. At the idea of me leaving, at the thought of losing another person they'd learned to trust, I looked at Lorenzo, seeking guidance I had no right to ask for. He wasn't saying anything, his face unreadable, just watching, letting me choose my path, letting me choose, not pressuring, giving me the space to make this decision on my own. "I can't promise to keep them perfectly safe," I said, laying out my limitations. "I can't promise I won't break again, that I won't fail when it matters most. No one can make that promise, not even me, with all my resources." Lorenzo's voice was understanding. "I can't promise I won't break under the weight. The admission cost me everything. You already broke before you came here. You came here broken, shattered into pieces, but you're still here, still trying, still fighting." His words cut through my excuses. "You've been broken this whole time, and you're still standing." I'm so scared of failing them. The truth, raw and painful. "Good. That's good. Fear means you understand. Fear means you understand what's at stake, that their lives matter, that this isn't a game." He reached over, took my hand, reached over across the children, took my hand, in his. "But don't let fear steal what you've built. Don't let it destroy what we've created together. What we've built. What these children need. Don't let fear win after we've already survived so much." I looked at our hands intertwined, at the 3 children between us, at the 3 children between us, watching with hope and fear in equal measure, at this strange, violent, beautiful family we'd somehow become against all odds, despite everything that should have torn us apart. "I don't want to leave," I admitted, the truth finally breaking free. "I'm terrified, but I don't want to run anymore." "Then don't run." 2 words, simple and profound. "But what if?" I started, the what ifs, flooding back. "No more what ifs." His voice was firm, cutting through my spiral. "Are you staying or going?" Final answer. No more hedging. His dark eyes held mine, demanding a choice. The children stared at me with identical eyes, waiting, holding their breath, 3 pairs of green eyes that held their mother's soul, and their father's hope, and their own desperate need for stability, waiting for me to decide their fate, to choose their future. I thought about my mother, about how I'd wasted months running from grief, about how I'd wasted months running from my grief instead of facing it, how I'd almost lost myself entirely in the fog of depression and guilt, become someone I didn't recognize, how I'd become someone who hurt instead of healed, who failed instead of saved. But here, in this chaos, in this violence, in this impossible situation, I'd found something precious. Purpose that gave me a reason to wake up. Love that demanded everything I had. A reason to wake up, to keep going, to be better than I'd been. A reason to fight, to survive, to become someone worth being. "I'm staying," I said, the words final and certain. "I'm staying with you, with them, with this family we've built from broken pieces." Lorenzo exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Like he'd been holding his breath, afraid of what I'd choose. The children relaxed instantly, tension draining from their small bodies. Marco stopped crying, tears drying on his cheeks. Sophia leaned into me, trusting me again. Nico smiled through his tears. Small, barely there, but real and precious and worth everything. But I need help, I continued, laying out my terms. I can't do this alone anymore. I need support. They need therapy, professional help, someone who specializes in childhood trauma, who knows how to help them process what they've seen, and I need to know you're all in with me. I need to know you're all in with us, not just watching from the sidelines, not just watching from monitors or protecting from a distance or sending money and hoping that's enough. They need their father present, engaged, here for the good and the bad. Lorenzo looked at his children, at the little faces that had haunted him, for 6 months, that he'd been too afraid to face, at the eyes that carried his wife's ghost but also their own souls, their own needs, their own desperate love for him. I don't know how to be what they need, he admitted, his own vulnerability matching mine. I don't know how to be a father anymore, how to be present without falling apart. Neither do I know how to be what they need. But we'll figure it out, one day at a time. Together, not alone, not hiding from each other. I squeezed his hand, offering partnership. We'll figure it out together, make mistakes together, fail, and succeed together. He nodded slowly, acceptance settling over his features. Then he did something that surprised me, that showed me he meant it. He pulled Nico into his lap with gentle hands, really held him, not just touching but embracing. Looked into those green eyes without flinching away, without seeing only Sarah, without running from the pain. Papa's here, he said softly, making a promise. Papa's not going anywhere, not anymore. Nico touched his father's face with wonder. Promise? Real promise? His small hand exploring the stubble on Lorenzo's jaw. I promise. On everything I have. Lorenzo's voice was thick with emotion. Sophia climbed over to him too, needing to be close. Then Marco, not wanting to be left out. All three of them piled onto Lorenzo, like puppies. And he held them without breaking, without retreating. Really held them. All three at once. For the first time since Sarah died, he held them without walls, without fear, without running from the pain. I watched them, my vision blurring. This broken man and his 3 broken babies, finding each other again after months of separation, finding each other again, rebuilding what had been shattered, creating something new from the pieces of what was lost. And I realized something profound. We were all shattered, every one of us, all traumatized by life and loss and violence, all scared of failing, of losing more, of not being enough, all carrying wounds that might never fully heal. But maybe that was okay. Maybe that was even beautiful in its own way. Maybe broken pieces could still fit together if you were patient enough. Maybe love didn't require perfection or strength or fearlessness, just presence, showing up, being there even when it hurt, just showing up day after day, hour after hour, moment after moment, even when it would be easier to run. Lorenzo looked at me over the children's heads. Thank you for choosing us. For not running when you had every reason to. For what? For not giving up on any of us. On them when 9 others did. On me when I didn't deserve it. When I gave you every reason to leave. His voice was raw, grateful. I could say the same thing about you. I smiled through tears. You didn't give up on yourself, on being their father. We're quite a pair, aren't we? A broken nurse and a killer trying to be a father. Quite a family, I corrected gently. A family built from broken pieces, but a family nonetheless. He smiled, tired, but genuine. Genuine, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. Yes, we are a family, all of us together. The sun started to rise. Golden light filtering through the windows, golden light filling the nursery like a benediction. The same light that had witnessed so much pain over the months, so much loss, so many tears, so much grief contained in these 4 walls, so much grief and trauma within these walls. But today it witnessed something else. Healing, slow and painful but real. Hope that refused to die, even in darkness. A family choosing each other despite everything, despite the violence and fear and trauma, choosing love over safety, choosing each other over easier paths. The children finally fell asleep, one by one, all 3 of them together, in Lorenzo's arms, safe at last, in their father's embrace. I stood up carefully, my body protesting, started to leave, to give them space, give them this moment alone, father and children together. Hazel, Lorenzo's voice stopped me. I turned back, questioning. Stay here with us, please. His voice was vulnerable, asking, not commanding. So I did, settling back down beside them. I sat back down beside them, becoming part of their circle, leaned against him. Let myself be part of this healing moment. Let myself be part of this broken, beautiful family that had chosen me as much as I'd chosen them. And for the first time since the attack, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. I felt like maybe we were going to be okay. Eventually, we were going to survive this, survive together, become something stronger than we'd been alone. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. We would heal, we would grow, we would become the family these children deserved. 3 weeks after the attack, something shifted in the house. The children were different, transformed in small but significant ways. Not perfect, still carrying scars that might never fully fade, still had nightmares that woke them screaming, still had moments of fear where shadows became threats, still jumped at loud noises, still sometimes looked at doors expecting danger, but they were laughing. More, the sound filling rooms that had been silent, playing more, engaging with the world instead of hiding from it, trusting more, reaching for us instead of pulling away, believing that safety might last. And Lorenzo, he was different too. He came home earlier, choosing family over business, ate dinner with us at the table, all of us together, read bedtime stories in accented English, bringing Italian fairy tales to life, was present in a way he hadn't been since Sarah died, in a way that made the house feel like a home instead of a mausoleum, that brought warmth to rooms that had been cold for too long. We fell into a rhythm, a comfortable pattern, a family rhythm that felt natural, inevitable, right in ways I couldn't explain. Tonight I was giving the children their bath in the large tub, all three in the tub together, a nightly ritual we'd established, splashing water everywhere, making a mess we'd have to clean up later, making a mess that I didn't mind, that felt like normal chaos. Being normal toddlers for once instead of traumatized survivors, finding joy in simple things like soap bubbles and rubber ducks. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway without warning, making my heart skip. Loosened tie, sleeves rolled up, top button undone. He looked less like a mafia boss tonight, more like a tired dad, who'd had a long day, human and approachable in mind. Need backup? He asked, a smile playing at his lips. Always, I admitted, gesturing to the chaos. Always welcome, especially with this crew. He knelt beside me on the bath mat, our shoulders touching, started washing Sophia's hair, while I wrangled Marco, who was trying to drink the bath water. Nico was trying to drink the bath water for the third time, apparently still convinced it was delicious. Nico, no, we've talked about this. That's not for drinking, that's for washing. He giggled at being caught, a sound of pure mischief. Actually giggled, mischief in his green eyes. Then splashed me deliberately, testing boundaries and finding joy in rebellion. Lorenzo laughed at my surprised face. A real laugh, the kind I'd only heard a handful of times, deep and genuine and beautiful, the kind I'd only heard a handful of times, the sound transforming his face, making him look years younger. You think that's funny? I tried to sound stern, failed completely. I splashed Nico back gently, making it a game. All three children erupted at the invitation. Full-on water war. Alliances forming and dissolving. Full-on water war. No rules. No mercy. We were both soaked in seconds. Water dripping from our hair. Our clothes clinging to our bodies. This was a $200 shirt, Lorenzo said mildly, looking down at the soaked fabric. Was being the key word, I pointed out, unable to stop grinning. He looked at me, water dripping from his hair, smile on his face, joy in his eyes, smile on his face that made my breath catch. Worth it, he said, and I knew he meant more than the shirt. Every penny worth it for this moment. After bath time, we got them into pajamas with practiced efficiency. Lorenzo carried Sophia with infinite care. I had Marco, who was already half asleep. Nico walked between us, holding both our hands, a bridge connecting us, holding both our hands like he needed to keep us together, like he was binding us into a unit, a family. We looked like a family, moved like a family, felt like a family, in every way that mattered. We put them in their cribs, the nightly ritual beginning, started the bedtime routine we'd perfected over weeks. Stories in English and Italian, songs in both languages, kisses distributed equally, each child receiving the same love and attention. Sophia looked up at Lorenzo, her green eyes serious. "Papa, sing Mama's song," she asked it carefully, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. Everything stopped, the air itself seeming to hold its breath. Lorenzo froze, his face going pale. His face went pale, all the color draining away like blood from a wound. "Baby, I don't think Papa remembers." I started, trying to save him from this. "I remember." His voice was barely a whisper, rough with emotion. His voice was barely a whisper. But he sat on the floor between the cribs. Where Sarah had died. Took a shaky breath that sounded like it hurt, like it was pulling air through broken ribs. Then he started singing, opening a door he'd kept locked. In Italian, the words flowing like water, soft, every note carrying love and grief. Broken, his voice cracking on certain words, beautiful despite the pain. Maybe beautiful because of it, beautiful in the way that only grief could be, acknowledging loss while celebrating what had been. I didn't understand the words, but I didn't need to. But I understood the emotion, felt it in my bones. The love that transcended death, the grief that honored what was lost, the goodbye he'd never gotten to say, the words he'd held inside for 6 months finally released. The children listened with rapt attention, quiet in a way they rarely were, peaceful, their little bodies relaxing, like they recognized it even if they didn't remember, like something in their DNA knew this song, like some part of them remembered their mother's voice singing the same song, like genetic memory carried her love to them. When he finished, his face was wet with tears, but he was smiling through them, smiling like he'd finally let go of something heavy he'd been carrying. But he was smiling joy and sorrow mixed together in a way that felt sacred. "Mama loved you so much," he said, his voice thick. "All 3 of you, every single one of you, more than anything in the world, more than her own life, more than anything she'd ever wanted. Where Mama now?" Miko asked the question they'd all been holding. Lorenzo's throat worked as he swallowed. "She's in heaven, watching you from above. Always watching you. Every day. Every moment. She sees everything you do. Every time you laugh. Every time you're brave." "She see Hazel?" Sophia asked, her question piercing my heart. My heart stopped at the innocence of the question, at the implications contained in those 3 words. Lorenzo looked at me, then back at his daughter, taking his time. "Yes, Piccola. She sees Hazel. She knows Hazel loves you." "Mama happy?" The question every child asks, needing reassurance that the absent parent approves. "Yes, baby." His voice cracked on the words. "I think Mama is very happy right now, proud of how brave you've all been." Marco reached through the crib bars, wanting contact. Touched Lorenzo's face with his small hand. Fingers tracing tear tracks. "A Papa happy?" he asked, perceiving more than we gave him credit for. Lorenzo caught his son's hand, held it like something precious, kissed it with infinite tenderness. "Yes, baby. Papa's happy now for the first time in a long time." All 3 children smiled at his answer, relief visible on their small faces. Then, like they'd choreographed it, they said goodnight in unison. And closed their eyes without argument. No crying, no protest, no fear, no resistance, no desperate clinging. Just peace, trusting that tomorrow would come, and we'd still be here. Just peace, settling over them like a blanket. We sat there in silence, sacred and profound, watching them breathe, their chests rising and falling in sync, watching them sleep peacefully. No nightmares tonight, no terror haunting their dreams, their faces relaxed in sleep, innocent and beautiful and whole. Finally, Lorenzo stood with effort, his body stiff, offered me his hand, pulled me up with gentle strength. We walked out together, our movements synchronized, closed the door quietly, leaving it slightly ajar like always so we could hear if they needed us. In the hallway, he stopped, turned to face me, his expression serious, weighted with things unsaid. "I need to tell you something," he began, nervous in a way I'd never seen. "Okay," I said, my heart starting to race. "When Sierra died, I thought my life was over. I thought my life was over. Thought I'd just exist. Thought I'd just exist. From day to day. Go through the motions like a ghost. Keep the business running. Because that's what I knew. Keep my children alive. Because that's what she'd want. But never really live again. Never feel anything but the constant ache of loss. His confession poured out. Lorenzo, I started, wanting to ease his pain. Let me finish. I need to say this. He stepped closer, needing me to hear this. Then you showed up in our lives like a miracle. I didn't deserve. This stubborn, broken, beautiful woman who refused to give up despite having every reason to run, who refused to give up on my children when 9 others had. On me when I gave you 1,000 reasons to leave. His hand came up, cupped my face, like I was something precious. You brought light back into this house that had been dark for so long. You made them laugh when I thought I'd never hear that sound again. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to want something beyond just survival. I just did what anyone would. I tried to deflect, uncomfortable with the praise. No, stop diminishing what you've done. You did what no one else could, what 9 others tried and failed. You stayed when staying was hard, when leaving would have been so much easier. Tears burned my eyes at his words. I'm falling in love with you, Hazel. Maybe I already have. Maybe I fell the first night I saw you holding them. Maybe already have fallen so deep I can't see the bottom. His thumb brushed my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. And I know it's complicated. I know nothing about this is simple. I know I'm dangerous. That my world is violent. That people die around me. I know you deserve better than a man with blood on his hands. A man who kills for a living. A man who can never be fully safe. But I can't pretend anymore. Can't keep lying to myself about what I feel. I can't pretend I don't want you. Don't need you. Don't love you with everything I have left. Lorenzo. His name came out breathless, overwhelmed. If you don't feel the same, tell me now. I'll respect it. I swear I will. You can stay as their nanny. Nothing has to change between us professionally. We'll pretend this conversation never happened. Go back to how things were. But if there's any chance, any possibility that you might feel even a fraction of what I feel. His voice was desperate, hopeful, terrified all at once. I kissed him, cutting off his words. Pulled him down and kissed him like I'd wanted to for weeks. Like I needed to breathe and he was air. Like I'd been too scared to admit I needed to. Like this was inevitable and I was tired of fighting it. He responded immediately, no hesitation. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, pulled me close. Like he was afraid I'd disappear. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of everything we'd been holding back. Real, no more pretending, no more wall, full of everything we'd been holding back. For weeks, months, since the beginning. All the wanting and needing and loving we'd denied. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. We were both breathing hard. Foreheads pressed together, sharing air, sharing space. Sharing this moment of perfect honesty. I love you, I said. The words simple and true. I love you and your children, and this chaotic, dangerous, beautiful life we've built. I love all of it, every impossible piece. Lorenzo's eyes filled with tears. You're sure about this? Because once we do this, there's no going back, no pretending it didn't happen. You'll be mine completely, not just the nanny, but mine. Completely, and I don't share what's mine. I don't let go once I've claimed something. His voice was intense, making sure I understood. Good. I'm glad you don't share. I met his intensity with my own. Because I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. He kissed me again. This time slower. Slower. This time savoring instead of desperate. Deeper. Exploring instead of claiming. Like he was memorizing me. Learning me. Committing this to memory. Like he was memorizing every detail. Like he needed to remember this moment forever. Sarah would have liked you, he said against my lips, sharing this with me. She would have loved how you love them, how you fight for them, how you see them as people instead of just children to manage. I wish I could have met her, I said honestly, meaning it. Part of her is still here, living on in them. In them, in those eyes that hold her soul. In those eyes, in their smiles, in the way they love. He pulled back slightly, looked at me with something like wonder, and I think, maybe she sent you to us to save us from drowning, to pull us back from the edge, to give us a reason to keep living instead of just surviving. I didn't save you? That's not how this works. We saved each other, rescued each other from our own darkness. The truth, simple and profound. Yes, you're right. We did, together when neither of us could do it alone. He smiled, kissed me softly. A sound came from the nursery, breaking our moment. Not crying, just a small noise. Just a small noise. Curious. Aware. We both rushed back in, moving as one unit. Nico was sitting up in his crib, not upset, not scared, just awake and watching. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked, checking for problems, finding none. He looked at us standing together, at Lorenzo's arm around my waist, natural and possessive, at how we were standing together like we belonged. That way. At how we fit together, two pieces of a puzzle finally connecting. "Hazel papas now?" he asked with the directness only children possessed. Lorenzo and I looked at each other, surprised by the question. "Do you want Hazel to be papas?" Lorenzo asked, letting him decide, giving him agency. All three children were awake now, watching us with interest. Watching us, three pairs of eyes suddenly alert and interested, three judges deciding our fate. "Yes," Nico said immediately without hesitation. "Yes," Sophia echoed her brother's enthusiasm. "Yes," Marco said, nodding vigorously. "Hazel stay forever and ever." Lorenzo looked at me, raised an eyebrow, silent question, asking permission, checking if I was ready for this. Silent question hanging between us. "Forever sounds perfect to me," I said, meaning every word. The children cheered. Actually cheered like we'd given them the best gift. Actually cheered, their voices raised in joy, then demanded we both come sit with them, wanting us close, needing our presence. So we did, accommodating their request, squeezed between the three cribs, somehow making it work, Lorenzo's arm around me, holding me close. Three pairs of green eyes watching us with pure joy, happiness radiating from their small faces. "Tell us story," Sophia demanded, taking charge like always. "What kind of story, baby?" Lorenzo asked, indulgently, willing to give her anything. "Happy story, with happy ending." She was specific in her requirements. He looked at me, smiled with his whole face. Smiled, and I saw his answer before he spoke. Once upon a time, there was a broken man who thought he'd never be happy again, who'd given up on joy, and three little babies who'd lost their way in darkness, who couldn't find the light. His voice took on the cadence of storytelling. "And then," Nico prompted, needing to know what happened next. "And then a brave woman showed up when they needed her most." Lorenzo continued, his eyes on me, and she helped them find their way back to each other, step by step, day by day, to each other, to love, to family they'd thought was lost forever, to family, to hope, to believing in tomorrow again. "Happy ending?" Marco asked, needing assurance, needing to know that good things could last. Lorenzo kissed the top of my head, the gesture tender and possessive. "The happiest ending possible," he confirmed. "The happiest because they all chose to stay together, to build something new from what was broken." We stayed there until they fell back asleep, none of us wanting to move. This strange, blended, beautiful family that had formed from grief and trauma and love. This strange, blended, beautiful family we'd become against all odds. And I realized something profound. I'd come here to escape my grief, to run from my pain, to hide from memories that haunted me, to run from my pain, to outrun the ghost of my mother, to find somewhere my broken heart couldn't follow. But instead I'd found exactly what I needed even though I hadn't known I was searching. Not escape from pain, but purpose through it. Not forgetting my past, but healing from it. Not a new life built on denial, but a new beginning built on truth. Not a new life erasing the old, but a new beginning, honoring what came before, while building something new, creating something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. With the man I loved beyond reason, and the three babies who'd stolen my heart from the first moment I saw them, who'd stolen my heart, who'd taught me to love again, who'd shown me that broken things could still be beautiful. My family, chosen and fought for and worth everything. Finally, completely irrevocably mine in every way that mattered. Finally, completely mine in every way that mattered. In every way that made me whole again. 6 months later, everything had changed. I woke up to small fingers poking my face, the gentlest alarm clock, opened my eyes to find 3 toddlers climbing onto the bed with practiced skill. Our bed, Lorenzo's and mine, the one we'd been sharing for months now. Lorenzo's and mine, shared and warm and home. Hazel. Up, Nico demanded with the authority only a 2-year-old could muster. He'd gotten bossy lately, asserting himself more and more, 2-year-old confidence growing stronger every day. Up. Sophia echoed her brother like always repeating, always following his lead. Marco just climbed into my lap without words. Marco just climbed into my lap with his version of good morning, the silent one who preferred actions to words. His version of good morning, affection through presence, not words. Lorenzo groaned beside me, still mostly asleep, pulled the pillow over his head in mock protest. Too early for this energy, he mumbled from under the pillow. Papa, up! All three shouted in unison, a coordinated attack. All three shouted, ganging up on him, using numbers to their advantage. He peeked out from under the pillow, with one eye. Pretended to be a monster, hands becoming claws. Grabbed them with theatrical growls. They shrieked with laughter, the sound filling the room with joy. The sound still made my chest tight with gratitude. The sound still made my chest tight, still felt like a miracle after everything. Still reminded me how close we'd come to losing this. Today was the anniversary, a milestone we'd been preparing for. 1 year since Sarah died. A year of grief and healing and growth. We'd been preparing them all week with simple words. Simple words they could understand. Mama in heaven, watching over them. We remember Mama with love. We love Mama even though she's gone. We love Mama forever, celebrating her memory instead of just mourning her loss. They didn't fully understand death yet, but they knew today was special, knew it mattered, knew we needed them to be gentle with their father's heart. After breakfast, we took them to the garden, all of us together, to the memorial Lorenzo had built with his own hands. A stone bench under a flowering tree, surrounded by roses. Sarah's favorite spot, the place where she'd spent her happiest moments, where she'd dreamed of watching her children grow. Sarah's favorite spot when she was alive, carefully maintained now as a shrine to her memory. I'd brought flowers specifically for this. Simple ones the children could hold without crushing. Simple ones the children could hold, soft petals and sturdy stems. For Mama, I said, handing them out, making it a gift instead of a duty. Nico took his seriously like everything he did. Walked to the bench with slow, deliberate steps, placed his flower carefully, adjusting it until it looked right, placed his flower carefully, making sure it was perfect. Mama, he said softly, with reverence, touched the stone like he could feel her through it. Sophia copied him, learning from watching. Mama Cielo, she said carefully. Mama Heaven, the phrase we'd taught her, her way of understanding, the phrase we'd taught her, making the abstract concrete. Marco needed help like always. The youngest, the one who still struggled, he kept trying to eat the flower, investigating it with his mouth. Lorenzo guided his hand with infinite patience, helping him set it down, teaching him through gentle touch, helped him set it down gently, turning it into a lesson about care and memory. Then Sophia did something that broke me all over again. She looked up at the sky with her green eyes. She looked up at the sky, searching. Bye-bye, Mama. Like she was waving, like she believed her mother could see, like she was waving, like she somehow understood death was a goodbye that lasted forever. Lorenzo's hand found mine, his grip tight enough to hurt. His grip was tight, squeezing, needing my strength to get through this, needing my support to get through this moment. Mama see? Nico asked, needing confirmation, needing to know his gesture mattered. Yes, baby. Every moment. Mama sees you, every single day. She's always watching, always proud of you. My voice was gentle, reassuring, giving him what he needed. Mama, happy? The question that mattered most, the one they'd asked before. Lorenzo knelt down, his knees hitting the grass. Eye level with his son, not looking down but meeting him where he was. Eye level with his son, giving him full attention. Yes, baby. Mama is very happy in heaven. Because you're growing so big and strong. Because you're brave even when you're scared. Because you love each other and take care of each other. Because you're good boys and a good girl. Exactly what she wanted you to be. Nico smiled at the praise, visibly relieved. Hugged his father, small arms barely reaching around. Love Papa, he declared, simple and pure. I love you too, Piccolo, Lorenzo said, his voice thick. More than anything in the world, more than I can put into words. After the memorial, we went inside, returning to normal. I'd promised them cookies as a reward. Their mama's recipe that Valentina had saved, passed down through generations. A piece of Sarah that lived on their mama's recipe that Valentina had saved, connecting them to the woman they'd never remember but would always carry with them. The kitchen became chaos almost immediately. Flour everywhere, coating surfaces and faces. Flour everywhere within minutes, coating every surface and several faces. The children helped enthusiastically, which meant making everything take 3 times longer but creating memories worth the mess. Nico dumped an entire cup of chocolate chips on the floor with a crash. "Oops," he said, eyes wide, not sorry at all. Sophia tried to crack an egg with too much enthusiasm. Got shell everywhere. Yolk dripping, got shell everywhere. The contents going places eggs shouldn't go. Started crying when it didn't work like she wanted. Frustration overwhelming her. Marco climbed onto the counter using a chair as a ladder. Somehow got batter in his hair, sticky and sweet. Somehow got batter in his hair. I still don't know how. Physics-defying toddler chaos. Lorenzo looked at me across the disaster. Flour on his nose. "This is insane. Completely out of control," he said, but he was smiling joy underneath the complaint. "This is family," I corrected him, returning his smile. "This is what normal looks like. This is what she wanted for them." He smiled, that real smile that transformed his face, wiped flour off my nose with gentle fingers. "Yes, it is perfect exactly like this, mess and all." While the cookies baked, filling the house with warmth, Lorenzo's phone rang. While the cookies baked, Lorenzo's phone rang. On the counter. Business. Always business. The empire that never slept. Always business. Demands that never stopped even on days like this. But this time he looked at it and declined the call without hesitation, choosing us over obligation. "They can wait," he said, setting it face down. "Today is for us, for family, for remembering what matters." The children played on the floor contentedly, building blocks into towers, knocking them down with glee, knocking them down with squeals of joy. The cycle repeated endlessly, destruction and creation in constant rhythm, their favorite game, endless and simple and joyful. Lorenzo pulled me aside while they were occupied, into his office, the same room where I'd discovered his truth. The same room where everything had changed between us, where I'd learned what he really was and chosen him anyway. "I have something for you," he said, nervous in a way I rarely saw. He opened his desk drawer with a key, pulled out a small box, velvet and expensive. Pulled out a small box, the kind that held futures and promises. My heart stopped, understanding what this meant. "I know we haven't been together long by conventional standards," he began, words tumbling out. "I know people will say it's too fast, that we're rushing, that we should wait longer. But I've wasted enough time in my life already, lost too much to care about what's conventional. I don't want to waste any more pretending I don't know what I want, pretending I'm not certain about you." He opened the box with trembling fingers. A ring sat nestled in silk, simple in design, beautiful in its simplicity. A single diamond surrounded by smaller emeralds, the stones catching light, green, like his children's eyes, like Sarah's eyes, like the bridge between past and future, like his children's eyes, connecting my future to their past, to Sarah's memory. "Marry me, Hazel," he said, voice shaking with emotion. "Not because the children need a mother. They have one already in heaven watching over them. They have one in heaven who will always be their mother, who I'll make sure they never forget, but because I need you. Because I can't imagine my life without you anymore, because you've become essential to me. Because I love you with everything I have, everything I am, everything I'll ever be. Because I want forever with you, want to build a life with you, want to grow old with you." "Lorenzo," I started, overwhelmed by his words. "I know my world is dangerous," he continued, needing me to hear everything. "I know I can't promise perfect safety, can't protect you from everything, can't guarantee there won't be more attacks, more violence, more fear, but I can promise this without reservation. I will love you with everything I am, with every breath in my body. I will protect you with my last breath, die before I let anything happen to you. And I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift you've given me, the gift of hope and love and family, trying to be the man you deserve, the father they deserve, the partner you need." His confession laid him bare. I looked at the ring, at this man who'd been broken and had learned to heal. At this man who'd been broken and had learned to heal, because I'd helped him, because we'd healed each other. at the life we'd built from grief and trauma and love, from impossible choices and dangerous loyalty, from grief and trauma and love, building something beautiful from ruin. Yes, I said, the words simple but carrying everything. Yes? He asked, needing confirmation, not quite believing. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, to forever, to choosing this every day. Yes, to this beautiful, chaotic, dangerous life we've built together. Yes, to being your wife, their mother, part of this family in every official way. Certainty rang in every word. He slipped the ring on my finger with reverent care. Slipped the ring on my finger, his hands shaking slightly, making the moment sacred. It fit perfectly like it had been made for me. Kissed me like he'd done that first night, like I was precious and irreplaceable, like I was precious, like I was everything, like he couldn't believe I was his, like I was his, entire world contained in one person. Timo, he whispered against my lips, the Italian feeling more intimate. Sempre, forever and always, in this life and whatever comes after. I love you too, I whispered back, meaning it, always, through everything, until the end and beyond. The oven timer went off with perfect timing. The children heard it from the living room where they'd been playing. Cookie! 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 They came running, a stampede of tiny feet. They came running like a herd, Nico in the lead, as always. Nico in the lead, Sophia and Marco right behind, all of them sticky and loud and perfect. We ran back to the kitchen, caught up in their joy, together, a family in every way that mattered. A family, complete and whole and chosen. That night, after the children were asleep, after baths and stories and songs, Lorenzo and I stood in the nursery doorway together. After the children were asleep in their toddler beds, we stood in the nursery doorway watching them breathe peacefully. They'd outgrown their cribs months ago. Toddler beds now, big kid beds, growing too fast, changing every day, becoming people instead of babies, growing too fast, time slipping away, childhood fleeting. Do you think she knows? I asked, quietly, needing his perspective. Sarah, do you think she knows they're okay? That we're okay? That we've built something good here? I think she knows more than okay, Lorenzo said, pulling me close. I think she knows they're loved completely and unconditionally. He pulled me close, his arm around my waist. By both of us, by me and by you, by this family we've created. I'll never try to replace her, I promised again, needing him to know. She'll always be their mother, always have that place, always be honored and remembered. You're not replacing her, that's not what this is. You're honoring her by loving what she loved most, by protecting what she died to protect, by making sure they grow up knowing they're loved. You're honoring her, carrying forward her legacy, making sure her love continues through you. His words carried conviction. I leaned into him, feeling safe and loved. Let myself feel the weight of this moment, this life, this love that had saved me, this love that had transformed everything, that had made me whole again. A year ago, I'd been broken beyond recognition, drowning in grief I couldn't process. Unable to save anyone, unable to help myself, unable to see a future worth living, unable to save anyone, including myself, lost in a fog of depression and guilt. Now, I was standing in a mansion with a mafia boss, whose ring I wore, wearing his ring, planning our wedding, building our future, loving his children as my own, becoming their mother in every way but biology, loving his children like they were mine, protecting them like they were mine, choosing them every single day. I'd come here to escape, to run away from pain, to hide from reality, to avoid facing what I'd lost, to outrun grief that followed me everywhere, to run from my pain and find somewhere it couldn't follow. Instead, I'd found everything I'd been looking for without knowing I was searching. Purpose that gave my life meaning, that made every day matter. Family that needed me as much as I needed them. Home in the last place I'd expected, with the last people I'd imagined choosing. Home with the most unlikely people in the most impossible circumstances. No regrets? Lorenzo asked, reading my mind like he often did. I looked at the 3 sleeping toddlers, innocent and peaceful, at the man beside me who'd become my everything, at the ring on my finger that promised forever, at the ring on my finger catching light from the hallway, emeralds glinting like tiny stars. Not a single one, I said with absolute certainty. Not one moment, not one choice, Not 1 second of this life. Even the gunfight? He had to ask. Had to make sure. Especially the gunfight, I said, making him laugh. Because it showed me what we're made of, what we're capable of, how far we'd go for each other. He laughed, the sound soft and full of love. Soft, real, the laugh I'd worked so hard to earn, the laugh that proved he was healing. The laugh I'd worked so hard to earn, the reward for all the pain we'd endured. Come on, he said, taking my hand. Let's go to bed. Tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow we start planning a wedding, making this official, telling the world you're mine. And dealing with whoever you decline today, I reminded him. Practical even in love. That too, he agreed. Unbothered. That too. But they can wait. They'll always have to wait when it comes to you. We walked down the hall hand in hand, our fingers intertwined. Hand in hand, our shadows merging on the wall. Past the panic room where I'd first proven I'd stay, where I'd protected his children from death. Past his office where he'd first confessed his feelings, where I'd learned the truth about his world. Past all the places where our story had unfolded scene by scene, where we'd built this impossible love. Past all the places where our story had unfolded, where we'd chosen each other again and again despite every reason not to. In our room, Lorenzo pulled me close with gentle insistence, kissed me slowly, taking his time, savoring every second, thoroughly, like we had all the time in the world, like nothing could interrupt this moment. Thank you, he said when we broke apart. Forehead against mine. For what? For answering that phone call, when you were at your lowest. For showing up when you could have run in the opposite direction. For staying when it got hard, when it got dangerous, when it would have been easier to leave. For loving us when we were unlovable, broken, traumatized, difficult. For loving us when we were unlovable, when we gave you every reason to leave, when 9 others had already given up. You were never unlovable, I told him firmly, needing him to believe. You were just lost, drowning, unable to see the way forward. And you found me, he said, wonder in his voice. You found all of us when we couldn't find ourselves. We found each other, I corrected gently, giving him credit. We saved each other when neither of us could save ourselves, pulled each other back from edges we'd been teetering on. The truth, simple and profound. He smiled, kissed me again with renewed passion, kissed me again, deeper this time, promising forever without words. I fell asleep in his arms, feeling completely safe. Safe despite the danger, despite the violence, despite everything that made this life complicated, love despite the chaos, despite my own brokenness, despite all my failures. Home in a way I'd never been before, in a way I'd always longed for but never found until now, in a way that felt inevitable and right and permanent, safe, loved, home in every way that mattered. And somewhere, I like to think Sarah was smiling from heaven, knowing her babies were okay, thriving, loved beyond measure, knowing her husband had found love again, had allowed himself to heal, had opened his heart to someone new, knowing her husband had found love again, without forgetting her, honoring her memory by building something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. Knowing that sometimes the best families are the ones we build from broken pieces that shouldn't fit but somehow do. Knowing that sometimes the best families are the ones we build from broken pieces, from impossible circumstances, from choices that looked like mistakes but turned out to be destiny. The ones we choose despite logic, despite danger, despite every practical reason to walk away. The ones we choose when choosing feels insane. When everyone would tell us we're making a mistake. When we know better but choose with our hearts anyway. The ones worth fighting for with everything we have. The ones worth dying for if it comes to that. But more importantly, the ones worth living for through every challenge and danger and impossible moment. The ones that start with a phone call made in desperation. A desperate need that brought 2 broken people together. A desperate need that changed everything. And a woman brave enough to say yes even when she was terrified. Even when she had no idea what she was walking into. Even when every instinct told her to run. Even when yes meant stepping into danger she couldn't imagine, violence she'd never witnessed, darkness she'd only read about. Even when yes meant facing her own grief instead of running, choosing to heal instead of hide, deciding to live instead of just survive. Even when yes meant loving people who came with complications and violence and a past that wouldn't die quietly, who came with trauma and danger and a legacy of darkness. Because sometimes the scariest thing you can do turns out to be the right thing, the thing that saves you instead of destroys you. Because sometimes the scariest thing you can do is also the rightest thing, the thing your soul needs even when your mind says run. And love, real love, is always worth the risk, no matter what it costs. And love, real love, is always worth the risk, always worth the fight, always worth choosing again and again, no matter how hard it gets. Always, through everything, until the end and beyond, in this life and whatever comes after, forever and ever without reservation or doubt. Always.